Good evening. Welcome. Welcome to the April 10th Board of Education meeting. The board has been in closed session since 6 o'clock. We have 7 board members present, and we were in closed session for 2A, student disciplinary case, and 2B, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body, and 2C, litigation, when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular public body has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the public body finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which case the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the minutes of the closed meeting. And D and E were not discussed. Okay, with that, we'll rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, tonight we have recognition for our National Merit finalists. Erin DeLuga, Principal at York. Go ahead. Thanks.
Good evening. I'm the principal at York High School, Erin DeLuga, and I'm very honored to call our National Merit finalists up to stand here in front. Come on up. The 9 National Merit finalists, and some will not be here tonight due to competitions and other activities, are being recognized before you are the students who moved through a semifinalist phase in September with 16,000 students across the country. After the students were notified of the semifinalist status, they were given the opportunity to complete an extraordinarily daunting application process. In February, those semifinalists were notified of finalist status, which allowed each of our finalists to continue on in the competition. Congratulations to Hannah, Matt, Linnea, Courtney, Karina, Luke, and Shul, Catherine, and Christopher. I am very honored to have the board officially recognize you, our students, for all of your hard work tonight and for your outstanding achievement. Congratulations.
Erin, you can stay. You can stay here. Well, thank you very much and congratulations. I'll give that to you first. I have my cheat sheet so I can pronounce the names right, I hope. Wow, what an accomplishment. I mean, this is, on behalf of the board, thank you guys for all your hard work, all the studying, all that you do to be able to do this. This is one heck of an award, and we are all very proud of you for it. Let me read this then. The proclamation, whereas the mission of the National Merit Scholar Corporation is to recognize and honor academically talented students in the United States, and the NMSC is recognized throughout America as the most prestigious indicator of academic excellence. And whereas of the 1.6 million entrants, some 50,000 with the highest PSAT NMS QT selection index scores, calculated by doubling the sum of the reading, writing and language, and math test scores, qualify for recognition in the National Merit Scholarship Program. And whereas to be considered for a Merit Scholarship Award, semifinalists must fulfill several requirements to advance to the finalist level of the competition. And whereas approximately 90% of the 16,000 semifinalists are expected to attain finalist standing, of which more than half of them will win National Merit Scholarship, earning the Merit Scholar title. And whereas York Community High School class of 2017 students Hannah Cronin, Matthew Dardick, Linnea Dirkscheide, Courtney Jopes, Karina Kanzler, Luke Rasmus, Anshul Shaw, Catherine Tomaska, and Christopher Ziebert have been named as finalists by the National Merit Scholarship Corporation. And whereas these accomplishments bring pride and prestige to York Community High School, District 205, the students, their families, and the community. Now therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education and Administration of Elmhurst Community Unit School District 205 express congratulations to these students and their families for these outstanding academic accomplishments. Thank you guys very much.
Okay, next we have public comments, and the board will receive public comments for up to 3 minutes. And we respond, from either administration or board responds at a later time. We don't respond tonight. First on the list is Chris Kaczynski.
Good evening, and thank you for the time to make a brief statement. My name is Chris Kosinski, and my wife and I have 4 children in the district, including 2 that are currently enrolled at Edison School. Our youngest daughter will be entering 3rd grade next year, and we believe that she and her classmates will be negatively impacted by the decision to implement an extremely large increase in class size to close to 30 students. A 50% increase, which is a staggering number for this community. We are members of a group of approximately 50 Edison families who strongly oppose this decision, many of which are sitting here today. I think it's important to communicate clarity regarding our group's objectives. We are asking for the current class size plan to be changed, with classes restored close to current levels. We would like this change to be effective before next school year starts. And we are calling on this board to implement a new process to ensure that this situation will not arise in the future. We intend to vigorously advocate for our positions on these issues and to significantly expand our efforts in the days and weeks ahead, because our children and their education are well worth it. As parents, we know a simple truth on this issue. Large class sizes hurt our children's education, or more plainly, big classes are bad, and they should be avoided. Does this board agree? And if so, why are we in this position? I know that some academics and consultants disagree. Thankfully, they don't get to decide. We, the community, get to decide, and we do so through our elected representatives on this board. The community is being very clear on this issue of very large outlier class sizes. We do not support it. We simply don't want it as part of our community. And I hope and trust that our elected representatives on this board will recognize this and therefore mobilize to implement change. Despite our group's efforts thus far, the core questions that we have raised remain inadequately addressed. And we notice that our concerns are not directly on your agenda for consideration this evening. We request that this dynamic change. We have asked important questions, such as what was done to try to avoid this negative outcome, if anything? What cost reduction measures were considered? How does this improve educational outcomes for our children and for our district? Are we truly resource constrained to the point where we absolutely must have nearly 30 kids in the 3rd grade classroom? Almost any business or organization can find less than 0.5% of their cost structure to reallocate to a high priority item, which raises another important question. Is the entirety of our planned budget viewed as a higher priority than fixing this problem? I would find that, frankly, very hard to believe. We do believe that if the senior leadership of this district is focused on solving this problem, that it can be solved. And we are asking for your support and for your action. I would conclude with 2 simple questions for the senior leadership of our district and for this board. Have you done everything in your power to avoid this clearly negative outcome? And if not, why not? Because the opinion of our community is clear. We oppose these outlier class sizes, and you are our voice. Will you speak on our behalf? We are calling for change. We expect better than this, and most importantly, our children and our community deserve better than this. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Gibson.
Hello, my name is Matt Gibson, and I'm the parent of 2 students at Edison Elementary. I'm here tonight to talk about the 28 students that are projected for my daughter's 3rd grade classroom next year. Edison anticipates the current 2nd graders will move from 3 sections to 2 sections in the 2018-2019 school year. Do you know that her class size will increase by 50%? 50%. We recognize that the long-term goal of District 205 is to balance class size across the district, and we are in support of finding a long-term solution. We look forward to being a part of focus groups and other community outreach initiatives to provide meaningful feedback towards that solution. But what is the answer in the short term, and where does this leave our students, our children next year? We remember the 360 phone survey recognized class size to be the 2nd most top priority for Elmhurst residents. We do not want a repeat of Jackson's messy experience last fall. I'd like to paint a picture for you right now. Think about the way our children's elementary classes are set up. When you walk around in the classroom, what do you see? You see pods of 4, a reading rug, a group reading table, and various other stations that multiple students can be working at together. What you see is a community. There is a bustling community inside of every elementary classroom. We know there is a purpose behind these communities too. Student engagement and a sense of community are key to our curriculum. This has been accomplished in recent years through Kagan Structures. Kagan Structures are instructional strategies designed to promote cooperation and communication in the classroom, boost students' confidence, and retain their interest in classroom interaction. In other words, every child gets to engage in and participate in the community. Now I'd like to paint a different picture for you. Think about the way that very same elementary classroom would look like if it had 50% more students in it. It's easy to see that we start running out of space as the number of students in the classroom goes up. It goes beyond adding physical items into the classroom like 10 desks, 10 chairs, and 10 kids. Think about what we lose. We lose the reading rug, we lose the group stations where students can work together on problem solving and projects. We might even lose the pods of 4, which are key component to community learning and student engagement. We lose our thriving, bustling community. Let's make sure that we, parents, board members, and the administration are making decisions to ensure our students have the opportunity to stay engaged in their own classroom community. Please make that decision that overcrowded classrooms are not providing educational equality or opportunity for our students. Make that decision today. This is the short-term solution we are seeking. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. George Cramp.
Good evening. My name is George Cramp, and I have been a resident of Elmhurst since 2002. I voted for the 2006 class size referendum and the associated tax increase that came with it, because I know that strong schools bolster a strong community. I am also the proud parent of 2 Edison students, Elena, a 4th grader, and Elliot, a 2nd grader. The proposal to move to 2 sections in Edison's 3rd grade next year for 55 students, roughly 28 kids per class, is alarming to all of the Edison parents. I also have a concern for a different reason. Like my daughter, who is in Reach, my son has proven to have academic talents. His teachers are always commenting on how insightful and bright he is. Unlike his sister, however, there is something unique about Elliot. You would not notice it until you looked at him closely. Then you would see his bright red hearing aids. Sorry. Elliot is hearing impaired and has an IEP. Elliot was born with a bilateral progressive hearing impairment called Connexin 26. Despite this, he is like every other little boy. He likes playing hockey and soccer and reading about superheroes. He loves hanging out with his hockey teammates and his buddies from school, and he hates homework. There are certainly other kids in his class with IEPs, and their parents certainly have their own unique concerns related to an overcrowded classroom. But I wanted to take a moment to discuss ours specifically. Elliot, despite having a microphone available to his teacher, still struggles to hear in his classroom with 19 students because of the ambient and background noises that are a natural consequence of having many children in one room. Adding nearly 10 more kids to his classroom will only elevate the background noise, hampering his learning even further. And at this point, we are already seeing declining test scores. Additionally, Elliot needs preferential seating, which is already difficult to achieve with 19 students. How can this possibly work if there are 10 more students in the room? How will the teacher be able to easily position him or herself by Elliot in an overcrowded classroom? I could go on about points in his IEP. There are many more. I actually had to cut a bunch out. The other boy in this picture that Matt is holding up is also hearing impaired. He's in 2nd grade. He's on my son's hockey team. And he's in another school in District 205. In his 2nd grade class, there are already 27 students. This boy's MAP score went down 40 points because the teacher is struggling to fulfill his IEP. Undoubtedly, a larger class size is a factor. This family and at least 4 other families from that school are pursuing private education. I appreciate John Hattie's status as an expert in the field of education and that the decision to move to larger class sizes was influenced by his research. However, there's an extraordinary amount of research advocating for smaller class sizes. Every single teacher I've spoken to advocates smaller class sizes. This includes my own sister, who is a doctorate in education, other teachers in my family, and teachers inside and outside the district who my wife and I know personally. Every teacher says a large class size is bad. Every single teacher. Thank you for letting me speak this evening. Please be mindful that behind us parents, you as the Board of Education are advocates for these children. You are advocates for Elliot. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Christy Phipps.
Hi, my name's Christy Phipps. I'm a Lincoln mom. I've got a 3rd grader and a 1st grader and another one starting in kindergarten next year. I've been here with you guys attending the majority of these school board meetings where the master facility plan has been discussed, and I'd like to make 2 comments. First, I'm actually here to voice my support of the full and most comprehensive master facility plan as it's been presented thus far. Thank you, everyone who's been working so hard on this, coming in on Saturdays. We really appreciate it. I'm thrilled that we have a real plan on paper to address our significant needs at Lincoln. It's astonishing to hear just how long the community has been discussing a new Lincoln school. And for the record, I personally prefer the clean slate option, in case you want to know. I'm even more thrilled that the master facility plan appears to be a comprehensive plan addressing the opportunities at all schools, especially the safety and security gaps. I've personally witnessed the opportunities at Madison and Bryan, and I've learned so much from my peers about the security gaps at other schools. I understand that there's concern about meeting the proposed timeline of a referendum on the November ballot, especially if the community feedback steers the plan in a new direction. If at all possible, I would like the Board of Education and the administration to strive to meet the proposed timeline. I'm the one parent answering Mr. Bloom's request that a long line of parents come here begging the board to move forward with this referendum process. Second, I'd like to request that decreasing the target class size be included in this master facility plan when it's presented to the community at the focus groups in the near future. As you know, District 205's current target class sizes are 25 students per class in grades K through 2 and 27 students per class in grades 3 through 5. So in addition to the maintenance and security concerns, the master facility plan takes into account many of the community's requests from Focus 205. For example, full-day kindergarten, future-ready classrooms, media centers, new STEM curriculum are all included, and it's wonderful. However, lower class sizes is also raised as a priority in Focus 205. And you continue to hear from our community regarding our desire for lower class sizes. I was personally involved with the push from Lincoln and Hawthorne and Jackson last year. You're hearing Edison parents this year. I'm super excited to hear more about the boundary study tonight, and I'm hopeful that lowering target class size is one of the goals in the study. You know, at Lincoln, we've got 26, 27, 28 students in second and third grade. Other schools have 18 and 19. I'm really hopeful that the plan is to really come somewhere in the middle. If it's just to bring everybody up to 25 and 27, I really can't support that. In addition, any plan that involves moving any programs to different schools, I think needs to be super transparent. So if there's any dual language that's moving, special education that's moving, I think full transparency in this situation will be critical. The community's engaged. We're ready to provide our input into the options that are presented in the master facility plan. Students at Lincoln are already being informed of the current options and are being asked to provide their opinions of the plans. I found out on the walk home from school today. So I'm excited. Let's get these focus groups on the calendar and let's start vetting the plan with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, those are all the names I have for public comments. We'll move to reports and presentations. First is improvement of reading instruction. Mary Baum. Thank you.
It's okay. That's all right. Well, good evening, everyone. I could not be happier to be here tonight presenting because this is something that speaks near and dear to your hearts as board members about your purpose for wanting to serve on the board, and really the purpose that all of us strive to meet every day, and that is improving instruction for our kids. So with that, let's get started. So our purpose tonight is to update you on one of our student achievement objectives, and that is ensuring student growth through a balanced assessment system. We're going to review our key performance indicator that's related to third grade reading. We will detail the district's response, how the district has responded in a data-informed way, and then share with you our mid-year progress. So as the board knows, one of our district key performance indicators, or KPIs, is that all students will be reading on grade level by the end of third grade. And on this particular graphic, I'm going to ask you to really focus just on the blue bar that's highlighted with the arrow, because we're going to return to this graph at the end. So in the fall, when Mary Ann Lemke and I presented on student achievement, we shared this graph with you. And based on Fontes and Pinnell instructional reading levels, at that time, 23% of our current fourth graders were not reading on grade level. Okay. We did not have this assessment last year, so we weren't able to assess them in this manner at the end of third grade. But as they entered fourth grade, 23% were below grade level. Even with some kids going through the summer slump and their skills dropping a little bit, that's a significant number and was truly a large concern for us. And I know we talked about it at one of our board meetings, and it was a concern. So it raised a lot of questions for us, but there were two really critical questions. Why didn't we know this sooner, and what are we going to do about it? So as I said, prior to the fall of this year, our teachers did not have the Fontes and Pinnell assessment system. So they did not have the tools that they really needed to accurately determine a student's reading level. They relied on the information they had available, but it was not precise enough to be very specific and strategic about knowing exactly where each of their kids were performing. And we can only work so well with the tools that we have. And so our teachers have worked diligently over the years, but this assessment truly gave them a little more. So enter Fontes and Pinnell. Typically, you would never have me standing up here advocating for adding another assessment. That's really not what we like to do. However, the assessments that we provide for our students really need to give us good instructional information and very targeted instructional information so that our teachers can make decisions. Fontes and Pinnell does just that. And as time goes on, then what you do is wean back on the assessments that don't give us that good information. So tonight I have with me teams from Hawthorne and Emerson Elementary Schools, and our team from Hawthorne is going to go through the Fontes and Pinnell testing, how this information informs core literacy instruction in the classroom, and then our team from Emerson is going to detail how this information informs acceleration at the elementary schools, which is an opportunity to accelerate each student's achievement by providing targeted instruction at their level. And then I'll finish up with an update on the progress we've made to date. So I'm going to turn it over to the team from Hawthorne.
Before Tim gets started, I just want to say one thing in response to her assessment comment, and that is we have also removed several assessments at various grade levels, which we've been analyzing, our information needs, and we don't want to over-assess and compromise classroom time. So go ahead. I just wanted to make that clear. We're not just adding, we're also taking away.
I'm Tim Reardon. I'm the principal at Hawthorne. I am beyond thrilled to be able to come here and talk about this tonight because this process has really changed the way our school looks and what the day looks like for kids. So I'm here. The assistant principal, Dr. Christina Pedraz, is here. Beth Allaire, first grade teacher, and Effie Nassis, our instructional coach. And we've been doing a lot this year, so we're going to start sort of at the macro level, and then we're going to narrow it down to the classroom level so you kind of get an overview of what we're doing. So the Fontes and Pinnell, or F&P as we call it, is an assessment that teachers give students, and it allows teachers to know certain characteristics about their students. So what typically happens is the teachers have a kit, they take a kit, and it's leveled, levels A for beginning readers, and it ends at a Z. And so what happens is for every level, there's a fiction text and a nonfiction text. And teachers assess students until they identify what's their we call it an instructional level. So we know based off certain criteria where we should be teaching kids in small groups. We also know what characteristics of those texts that we can focus on and what strategies we can use to meet those needs for our students. So the students are tested 3 times a year. We do it in the fall, we do it in the winter, and then we're going to start in the spring and beginning of May. And so this is done either during our acceleration time or it's done during independent reading, the independent reading portion of Reader's Workshop. How long does it take to test a student? The answer is it depends. So when we did it the first time, students didn't have levels. And so we did have word lists, and we had some success where students read a word list, and then it was like, based off where we call it falling out on the word list, we're going to give them that level assessment. So the first time we did it, students were taking, sometimes the word list was helpful, sometimes it wasn't. And so when we did it the first time, it did take more time because we had nowhere to start. We had to figure out, every student's level. Moving forward, in the winter, it took significantly less time because teachers had a level, and then based off the work that they've been doing with the students, they're able to sort of predict where they should be. Typically, it's 1 or 2 levels on average. So sometimes it's more, sometimes some students stay the same level. So what happens is the teacher gives the student a book, and the teacher has like a record that they keep, and the student reads part of the assessment out loud, and the teacher is literally following along with the student and marks things down. Did a student mispronounce a word? Did a student insert a word? Did a student self-correct their own reading? And then the student, at a certain point in the story, the student stops, reads the rest of the story to themselves, and then the teacher has a conversation with the student, and there's prompts. There's different types of questions we ask students, and based off the students' responses, we develop a comprehension score. There's a couple different things that determine a student's level, basically being comprehension and accuracy are the two big ones. Once we have our data, then teachers can make either a strategic group based off of things that they see, or they do a guided reading group where they have kids at similar levels with similar needs and they teach them that way. And as Beth will show you later, sometimes depending on a student, some students have, we do have some students that the best fit for them is more of a one-to-one conferring, but Beth is going to go through all of those with you and explain what she does. We have a file for each student, and so we're going to keep longitudinal data of how kids do with the assessment. So imagine a manila folder. On the inside, it has every F&P book and level, and we keep track of the stories kids read. We mark the date so we know their levels and we can track them over time to make sure that they're making progress. And so, after we do it this time, when we do class lists, I'll take all the folders, I'll arrange them by class list, I'll give them to the next year's teacher, they'll have their students' data from the previous year. It gives them an opportunity to look, there'll be notes in there, they can see what types of errors their kids are making, and they can actually see, because we'll save the records, how their students grew as readers from the beginning of the school year to the end of the school year. So that's like the overall how we administer the assessment. The next part I'm going to show you, I know you can't really read this, but this is a tool that we have utilized that we started using at our data review meetings this year. And what this does is when we meet as a PLC every week, but we do every 6 to 8 weeks. We bring in all the classroom teachers, the reading specialist, any pertinent student service personnel, the instructional coach, and myself and Dr. Pedraza, and we focus more on students who, we look at everyone overall to see how we're growing, but the purpose of the meeting is to focus on students who may not be making the progress that we are hoping. So one of the things that we actually do is we have a conversation, and the one nice thing that really changed this year from last year is that when we're talking about students who may need extra support, because of acceleration, multiple teachers are able to give input on the same student. In past years, that wasn't possible. It was just the classroom teacher trying to figure it out. Their peers would offer support the best that they could, but typically nobody else in the room worked with the student, so it was hard to have that other supportive voice. And so basically what we do is students who may not be progressing at the rate that we hope, we develop a very specific plan for them. So we say, here's our hypothesis, based off this data, here's our hypothesis, this is what we're going to do about it. How is the classroom teacher going to differentiate, which typically is meeting with the student 4 to 5 times a week. And then we talk about what is happening in the acceleration group. We set a goal for the student. If the student, we come back, we look at the data because we need to give time for the student to make the progress. We look back at it and we say the student's growing, continue with the plan. The student's not making the progress we'd hoped. We're going to problem solve again and come up with a new plan. And that is my transition to Dr. Pedraza, because she's going to explain how we become even more focused with the data.
All right, so I'm here today to talk to you about 2 resources that teachers are using after they give the assessment to make really specific instructional decisions that are going to help all students to succeed in their classroom. So the first one that I want to talk about is the literacy continuum itself. That is created by Fountas and Pinnell, so it aligns really nicely with the assessment. It's organized by grade level, but then it's also organized by reading level. So a teacher can look at some general teaching points that would fit for their grade level, or they can drill down by the actual Fountas and Pinnell level itself. Within that, there is a description of the readers, there's a description of text at that level, and then there is a description of the teaching points themselves at each level aligned to the Fountas and Pinnell assessment. So it gives guided reading teaching points, word work teaching points, writing teaching points, and again, those are all aligned depending on what level the students are at themselves. And so by teachers using that, that's really helping them to really hone in on what are their strengths and then what are things that they are needing to work on. In addition to the literacy continuum is the person I like to call my girl, Jennifer Saravallo, because I love her. I'm a little bit of obsessed with her. I follow her probably a little bit too much. But she has this wonderful resource called the Reading Strategies book. So where the Fountas and Pinnell continuum lists teaching points that the teachers should work on with their students based on what level they're at or what grade level they're at. The reading strategies book further drills that down and actually includes anchor charts, text examples, and specific language for the teachers to use in instruction. So it really gives more specifics. It breaks it down by fiction and nonfiction strategies, and it's organized as well by theme and then also by Fountas and Pinnell level. So it's really very teacher-friendly, very user-friendly, and it's really helping to build that capacity of our teachers so that they are able to help all the kids in their classroom grow.
Hi, as Tim said, I'm Beth Allaire. I teach first grade at Hawthorne, have been there for many, many years, more than I like to talk about. But anyway, the F&P assessment, yes, the F&P assessment, as Tim and Christina have both said, gives us several different data points. So we can see the students' accuracy, we can see their fluency, we can see their comprehension, and we also can tell their self-correction rate when they're reading and they misspeak a word or say a word incorrectly, do they go back and fix it? So when we look at all this data, then once I finish with all my students, I look at all the data and look at the overall level of the reader. And then I can use that information and use this F&P data to drive my instruction, my reading instruction. So I can use this data to help me, one other thing. The levels that you see, the first column is fall, the second column is the winter scores. We haven't done the spring yet. And the letters might not mean a lot to you if you can see them, but the color, blue, any boxes that are blue, indicate above level readers. Green is on level readers. Yellow are slightly below level readers, and red are significantly below readers. So taking a look just from fall to winter, you can see a big difference because when we look at all this information and we get students' levels, then I can use those levels to create small groups called guided reading groups, where I will meet with this small group of kids who are at a similar reading level, and then we work obviously on skills they need to develop to reach that next reading level. So that is our guided reading groups, but I also can use the data to create strategy groups. So if there's a group of kids, no matter where, what level they're at, and they're struggling with fluency, I could call them together, we meet together, and we discuss strategies and practice strategies to increase their fluency in their reading. Or anybody who's struggling with comprehension, again, I can bring those kids together and we can focus our lessons and focus my instruction on comprehension skills, whatever they might need. And then I also look at this data with each of my first graders. We kind of look together and we come up with a reading goal. Each of them comes up with a reading goal, something they feel like they need to work on to kind of take it to that next level of reading. And so, during that time, we also celebrate their strengths, but talk about what they can work on. And we can focus on the reading goal during guided reading. We do focus on it during guided reading or strategy groups as well. And we also focus on it during independent reading time. Each of my students has a reading goal that is printed up on a little bookmark that they keep in their independent reading book boxes. And their first job when they sit down is to read that, so they can focus their reading and they're practicing those skills each time they read, which is about 30 minutes a day. So, and then I also inform the parents of that goal and ask them to kind of post it or keep it somewhere at home where their students or their children read, so they can also focus on it then. So, and I know Effie is going to talk about, Emerson is going to talk about the PLCs and acceleration, but we also use the data overall with my first grade team of teachers, and that's how we divide our groups of kids for acceleration time, so that they are getting exactly what they need. So that's that. I'm handing it over to Effie.
She's a rock star. All right, so part of my role as an instructional coach is to always be thinking about the next move. Where are we going next? Where can we constantly grow as professionals as well? So our immediate next step is the ongoing training of the administration of the assessment. This is still our first year, and we're still constantly learning and refining our practices. And we're really needing to look to make sure that we are administering the test with validity the way that it was intended. Because keep in mind, we're training teachers all to do it one-on-one eventually, so that we all have to be administering the test in the same way. And actually, starting tomorrow, we're going to continue with that. Finally, our data collection. So looking to see that we are systematically collecting the data in a way that regardless of the teacher or individual who looks at that data, it's all documented in the same way, which is a logistical piece that will help us along as that student goes through the school system, K-5 in our buildings. And then the analysis. So we have the data, which is great, but what are we going to do with the data? And as you can tell by Beth, we've already started working on implementing those instructional decisions from the data within our classrooms. And then our resources. So Dr. Pedraza talked about the resources that are there, but making sure once you get the data, you have to know what it means and then how to properly use those resources to better your instruction. And resources, we talked about 2 texts, but also the adults in the building, the reading specialists, the coaches, and our PLC group together to move all our students. Which leads us into kind of the next more long-term goal are to refine our grade level PLC focus and discussions. So the F&P assessment is just the starting point when we're looking at where a student is. We've also built in common formative assessments that we can also look at for data analysis. So when we're talking about a child, we're not talking about just one level or one piece of data, but all of those comprehensively that make up a bigger picture of how the child is performing. And with that, we together collectively need to continue working on problem solving for all levels of students to get them to progress. And then that leads us to our instructional strategies. A lot of times we talk about the what we're doing in our classrooms all together, but we really need to be moving the conversation more toward the how are we instructing our students? What strategies are we specifically using from the resources provided? What is the data showing us? How are we going to teach these students to move them all to the next level? And acceleration block is one of those pieces that the structure of the schedule allows us to have that extra time to really target the needs of all our students, regardless of what level they're at. And I know we've been talking about a lot about levels. We don't talk about the students as levels or the children as levels, but that's just our starting point to help us truly accelerate the learning for all students. So that's where we're going. And then speaking of acceleration,
Say. All right, that was a really nice lead-in. Thank you. I'm Michelle Thompson, the principal at Emerson, and I have with me Carol Witt, first grade teacher, and Erica Bradley, a third grade teacher. So Emerson, what does acceleration look like at Emerson? The purpose of acceleration is to provide a second dose of literacy instruction. So they talked a lot about Reader's Workshop. Acceleration is that second dose of literacy instruction that is targeted, and we're able to regroup the students, and we intervene for the students who are not at grade level, and we have them in smaller groups. And then the students that are on and beyond grade level, they're in larger groups, and we're enriching them. And we do that by having a master schedule that's built to flood support into the grade level. So for 30 minutes every single day, I have an EL teacher, a special education resource teacher, and a literacy specialist who floods into each grade level so that we can regroup the students for that extra dose of literacy instruction. And they'll tell you more about how we do that. But I kind of wanted to show you a day in the life of third grade acceleration. So this is what I get the privilege of during an acceleration block. I get to walk around and visit all the different groups. And it's just so neat because I walk around and I'm seeing the same strategy, but being taught in differentiated ways based on the needs of that group. And so you can see we have a special education resource teacher, we have our EL teacher with their small groups, our literacy specialist with the small group. That's our GERT teacher because that's also when they get
their reach, ELA reach is during that acceleration block time. And then I walk into the on and beyond classrooms and they're working in partners, they're working with the teacher in a whole group, they're working with teams doing things. It looks different every single day, but it's differentiated based on the needs of the students. And so I'm going to pass it over to Erica, who is going to tell you a little more about how our PLCs support acceleration.
Hi, I'm Erica Bradley, and I teach third grade at Elmhurst. PLC time this year with Dr. Thompson's awesome planning is actually one of my favorite planning blocks with my team, because we actually get things planned that are useful and helpful for at least a 2-week period at a time. When the team meets, our day happens to be Monday. We are fortunate enough to have the EL teacher, reading teacher. We have 3 sections in third grade there, and the resource teacher actually at the meeting for the planning time. The other members of our team, the reach teacher and the assistants that also help push in and support, are not able to be at that meeting, but they are included on all of our shared email communication tools and Google Docs that we share within each other. When we go into the meeting, we start with School Ride, which we all are using during our Reader's Workshop. And as we know, Reader's Workshop kind of jumps from one skill to the next and doses on. So we do some backwards planning, and we do look what we're going to use for their summative at the end and look at those skills. And then we look where they fall within the Reader's Workshop, and we prioritize them from that starting point and what we're all seeing what the students can do, because we do try to stick with the skill or strategy for up to 2 weeks in acceleration, and we hope that they've already seen it in the Reader's Workshop, but then we dive really deep into it within their level. And at our planning time, we do a million things that I love, and we kind of divide and conquer. We get our goals set together as a team, and then we're like little robots that all do different things. We go out and we find resources. We go to find the texts, whether it's going to be my group's level or a different group's level. We have for each skill, for doing main idea, we go to ReadWorks, Newsella, we reading A to Z, or things we have in our files, and we actually scan and we download them into files in Google Docs, so you don't have to sit there and search for all of your texts later on, and the levels are listed there. We're big fans of the Saravello book as well, so we use the Saravello book. We copy and scan her lessons into the same folder. For example, I'm just using main idea here, and we list what level it is good for, so then when you go in later and plan for your own group, all of the resources are still there. We also try to use the same graphic organizers no matter what level they are at, so students might see this during Reader's Workshop, and then they see it again during acceleration time. So the team decides, or sometimes we design the graphic organizer we're going to use, and then the teacher can adjust to how it's appropriate for that group's level. Next slide. We were afraid of the clicker. So these are just some example documents that we use. Like I said, especially for the team members that can't be at our immediate meeting, that some teachers might meet with them one-on-one later, but we send a literacy communication tool out that will include the learning target and the I can statement that we all use with all of our groups in every classroom, so that is the same. It'll include important terminology or vocabulary we want them to use. Right now we happen to be doing our content unit on weather, and we incorporate it into literacy, so our essential questions are listed on there. We list our resources, the strategies. Sometimes we even link the docs to the Google folders if we have enough time. So these different documents are there to make time when I sit down and actually do my planning, it's halfway done for me. We don't have to stress on how am I going to find this or that. And so we really utilize all of us together, and we get a lot done in the 30 minutes.
So then we get into what role does the data play in acceleration. So we started off the school year with Fontes and Pennell and doing the benchmark testing. And from that, we were able to create our initial groups. So we had an intervention group or groups as needed, and then the other ones could be in acceleration. So we can be pushing them beyond their potential of what we're seeing in the classroom. So during acceleration, the teachers start to collect data. So up in the corner, you'll see a little print of a sheet that we use, which is an informal running learning record. So it's teachers going to lean into the student and just listen to them read about 100 words and record the information they're listening to, errors they might be having or fluency problems that they're having. They're listening to how the students are talking together. You can be asking those comprehension questions, and you can just start collecting additional data about those students. And then you're going to analyze that data. You're going to look for the patterns, the errors the students have. You're going to compare notes with the classroom teachers during your PLCT meetings, and then you're going to decide the strengths and the needs of each of the individual students. So this is an example of one of the forms that we use during our PLC planning. So this is a form where all the documentation is out there that you can see what each teacher is doing with the students. And you'll notice that when we group the students, the reading teacher is working with the students who may be below grade level with their reading skills. So she gets to meet with that targeted group. The special ed teacher gets to meet with the students who have IEPs. And then we'll have the ELL teacher who's meeting with students who are speaking additional languages. And so all of those teachers are able to work with the students that they have specific goals for, and then the classroom teachers also take a portion of the students to work with. And during this time, we're making informed decisions. We're looking at what is the learning target. This is also on our planning sheet. We're just deciding what strategies need to be taught, and we're also deciding what method is the most efficient. And we're going to plan instruction based on the needs of the students. Now, this is never ending. This is a continuous cycle. So when we're planning that instruction, we take that evidence into account, and then we can begin that analysis again. Do those students need to be regrouped? Do we need to change our method? Do we need to change our style? So this year at Emerson, we've seen that this acceleration has proven with the data that the students are making positive student growth with their reading skills this year.
And I'll be honest, I stole the idea for this slide from Tim because I thought it was a good idea to put our next steps, because we are really, really proud of acceleration at Emerson this year and how much the growth the students have made, but there's always next steps. There's always room to keep growing and improving our practice. So our next steps is to continue to build our resources for those high quality cohesive lessons. We really want that curricular cohesion so that the students are not hearing one thing in their classroom and then hearing something totally different from maybe their EL teacher, because our most struggling students need the most cohesive instruction throughout the day. So we're going to continue to build our resources. I also would love staff to feel comfortable teaching groups different than they taught this year. We kind of got into a pattern where, you know, some teachers always took the beyond groups or always took those on groups, and I want to kind of help them step out of their comfort zone and try a new challenge next year. And then also build teacher comfort level with utilizing those informal assessments to continue monitoring student progress and move students along in groups and levels as needed. But we are really proud and excited about acceleration at Emerson this year.
All right, well, thank you to both of our teams. This is not the first graph that we looked at this evening. That was fourth grade, and we're going to look at that next. But this is our current third grade. So this feeds into our KPI of all students reading at grade level by the end of third grade. You can see the first blue bar over to the left of the graph, that in the fall, 24% of our current third graders were not reading at grade level. When we assessed them again in the winter, that number had dropped to 17%. And then additionally in the fall, if you look at the last two blue columns to the right of the graph, 69% of our students either met or exceeded the grade level target in the fall, and in the winter that grew to 79%. So that's an important data point, the percentage of kids who meet or exceed, because oftentimes when you're looking at a class full of a wide range of learners, parents whose students are high achievers, as well as students who may be struggling, as well as students who are on level, are concerned that their individual child's needs won't be met in one way or another. And here we can see that we are able to move along all kids because of this targeted instruction that you've heard so much about. So now let's return back to that first graph that we looked at. So in the fall, we saw 23% of the current fourth graders were below grade level. That percentage has dropped to 19% in the winter. While we're happy with the decrease, we expect and need to decrease that even further. One point of caution is that these are our fourth graders, and unfortunately, the older students become when they're reading below grade level, it takes longer and is more difficult to close that gap. So we really need to intensify those efforts so that we can close that even more. As we saw with our third grade data, we've seen an increase in the percentage of students who are meeting or exceeding the grade level standard. In the fall, 67% of our fourth graders met or exceeded the grade level target, and in the winter, it was 75%. So before I get into some final thoughts, one of the things I want to highlight, a couple of things. First, I couldn't be more proud to stand back and listen to our classroom teachers talk about the work that they are doing every day. When I think about the growth and the absorption our teachers have handled with the change in curriculum and using a new assessment and really looking at individual needs of students, the change in our classrooms is dramatic. And I can't be more proud of our teachers across the district, because while we have Hawthorne and Emerson here tonight, they really do represent the work that is going on in each of our schools across the district. The other piece that I want to highlight is, as you listen to the presentation at different points, you saw all of the things that we've been talking about come into play. When we talk about PTA donations for classroom libraries and guided reading materials and how that's supplemented with funds from learning and teaching, that's what they use them for, those small guided reading groups, that independent reading time, the assessment kits and all of the work that goes on with assessment, the professional development that we use our learning and teaching money and our Title II funds for, comes through in the training we've done for our instructional coaches, the training that we've done on Fontes and Pinnell. They talk about how they want to continue to grow in PLCs. We've worked with professional development for our secondary schools for PLCs this year, and our elementary schools will begin that process in May and June. So it really ties together all of the priorities that we have into this presentation, and what you can see is it's bringing about great results for kids. So we are happy to take any questions that you may have.
Go ahead, Kara.
Well, first, they should come back.
Come over here. Please come over here.
First of all, I just have to say thank you, because I know as a former teacher how hard it is to set up readers workshop, do all that work happens not when there's kids there, because you have to do that preparation. And I love to see how much you're working together. I just think that's awesome, because then everybody's really on board for every kid, and that's awesome. So I guess it's all good. Yeah. And I guess my only question is, are you finding it hard to get all the individual assessing done?
Well, I will say the first round was really difficult because, as Tim pointed out, we didn't have a starting point because the kids had never been through that assessment before. It does shorten. One of the things we tell our teachers is, once kids have topped out 2 years above grade level, you really need to stop the assessment, because in the work that they do, they will continue to grow as readers, but we don't need to continue assessing kids at a 5th grade level in 1st grade, at a Z when they are in 3rd grade. So that shortens it some, but it does take time. However, what we found is, and I think the teachers would attest to, the teachers really want to be the one to do the assessing, because you get so much than just the letter and level that they're reading at. The conversing that they do with the kids, as well as listening to them read, gives them a wealth of information.
Thank you very much. My oldest is graduating from college, hopefully, in the next month. And yeah, and this is there's such a night and day experience from what she had when she was in elementary. And you guys, thank you for all the work that you've done and all that you've put in. My question is just around, this is happening, what does this look like at the other schools? And is it possible to share some of the data or their anecdotes from those other schools like these that we could see?
So the data that I was showing you was district-wide data. It's very similar. All of our schools have the 30-minute acceleration period with the literacy focus. They meet in groups. They regroup the kids across grade level by reading level. Our schools all have the reading workshop model in place. Actually, Christine Trendle, Jen Barnaby, Leslie Weber are here as well tonight from 3 of our other elementary schools, and I think they would attest to it's the same strategic process going on in each of our schools. And that's been a very important point, is trying to be consistent.
I thank you for adding some of my questions that I'd asked earlier about what does it look like before, what does it look like after. Thank you for the excitement and the way that you talked about the PLCs and how it adds value for you as teachers, and how instead of all of you individually having to take the time to gather and prepare for the lessons or the new approach, let's say, that you are working together as teams, which was good for us to hear, because it supports the initiative for PLCs and the time for you all to be working together. So that was a good testament of not just in the classroom, but the prep work of how to help you do this. Because this is the first year, so the data that you showed district-wide was for the first year.
Yes, from fall and winter. Okay. And then we'll have in June, when we report on our student achievement objectives, we'll have our spring data.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a question or two. Thank you also, because this is about personalized learning and not letting any student slip through the cracks. So this is new for us, and so I thank you for that. And also, sometimes I get asked the question like, why are we changing? Why are we doing all these changes? And what we had before, Reading Street, was not good for kids. And this is why we're changing, because we're doing something much better. And the result is just after a few months, there's results. So I'm excited to see what's in store for the next, even spring and then years to come. And just more of a broader question, when we're talking about assessments, do we need the MAP test for reading, now that we have this kind of system? I mean, it's just a question I'm throwing out there. You don't
Shannon, that is a loaded question.
I know, you don't have to answer it, but it's a lot of assessing, so it's just something. It is. Can we look at that?
Yes, it is definitely something we are looking at. If you were to ask Marianne if she were here, she would have a very strong opinion on it, that we feel like there are other assessments such as Fontes Pinnell that give us far better information. But that's part of a bigger conversation of all the reasons we use MAP, from reach identification to other pieces. But yes, we would like to move away from something like that to something that's more targeted and gives us better information.
The winter map was being administered primarily because we weren't at the point where our assessment system was sophisticated enough yet to have the teacher growth piece factored in for the purpose of actual just compliance with the law. And if you take a look at information on MAP, the difference from the fall to spring data versus the fall to fall data is minuscule in terms of it really making a significant difference. And then, of course, it's not as timely as this type of information. So with all the testing in the spring, we are looking right now to just go fall to fall and eliminate some of those interim tests that aren't giving us as much actionable information. But there are different things that those tests were being used for, and so we have to be careful about making sure that we are meeting all the information needs of the people in the system.
questions?
All right, then I'm going to put in one last plug. I've gone back to this data slide from Hawthorne's first grade. If you will look at the fall, the red and the yellow, those are our first graders who entered Hawthorne not reading at grade level. In fact, the very top student below A, so really a non-reader. So when we think about why do we need all-day kindergarten, I want to direct you to that red and yellow. That's a significant amount of first graders coming in reading below grade level at one school. And I personally believe and have experienced in a school that had all-day kindergarten, we would see that go away. So that's just my last plug. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, boundary study. Chris Walton? You're on.
So we're gonna Skype our consultant in, our boundaries consultant in. So Chris or Dave will work on that. He's expecting us sometime tonight.
So let's see here.
Hello, this is Matthew Cropper here. Are you ready for me?
Yes, we are. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight. The objective of me being here in this presentation is to give you an overview of the boundary study work that we have recently completed with the school district. Just a little bit of background before we get into that, a little bit about who we are. We are Cropper GIS Consulting, based out of right outside of Columbus, Ohio, but we do this kind of work with districts all over the United States. Our specialty is redistricting and boundary studies, but we also do demographic studies, population enrollment forecasting, and then facility planning. I am Matthew Cropper, and president of the company, and been working in this industry for over 15 years, and have managed projects like this, and everything from 2,000 to 200,000 student school districts, projects like this all across the United States. We've done a lot of work across the U.S., but have done a lot of work in Illinois. Some of the unit districts that we've worked in include DeKalb District 428, Unit 4 schools, and Bloomington Normal, and then also Morton District 709. But we worked with a lot of other districts, including CCSD 59 and other districts near you, near your district where you guys are. So we bring a lot of expertise to the table on what has worked and what hasn't worked, and just we learn from every project we do and build on that. So, but what I'm here to present to you are some options and some of the analysis. Really going to give you an overview on what the information is saying. So you can see this first table shows a list of schools. You can see the current capacity of the buildings, and that's how many students can fit in each building per the grade cohort. And then there you'll notice an option capacity, and that option capacity differs in some schools because this boundary study was aligned with potential facility considerations. And so we have some assumptions when we started drafting options that do impact or change the capacity of the buildings. And then you'll see it includes Edison, Field, and Lincoln schools. elementary schools. You'll see that we have the total enrolled information here, and then we also calculate the live-in numbers for students so that we can do an apples-to-apples comparison on options. And then you'll see that we've created two options. We have an option A and an option B just for your consideration, for your review. And so when you look at this table, the intent of this table is to understand how many students would likely or fit in each building or are estimated to be in each building per the particular option. This is using 2017-18 student data, which we have taken from the district and mapped out each student so that we know where each student lives in the district and where they live throughout the school system. And with our technology, we can count students on any street and summarize and develop efficient and accurate boundary options, which is what we've done here. The next table is the same thing, and it's representing the same data as the prior table, but it's giving it to you in terms of percent utilized. And this is something that I find to be very useful, and when you're comparing utilization of each school and to see how they compare to each other. Sometimes it's hard to look at total numbers and make comparisons because building capacities differ, but this gets you an idea on what the percent utilization is of each building and how the options provide that relief. You'll notice that the Lincoln School is at 100% utilization, and one of the primary objectives with this was to provide some of that relief to Lincoln and as well as other schools, and to balance utilization among the schools while minimizing the number of students that we have to move. So this is something that you can reference. You see the option capacity as just like the former table, and note that the options A and B utilization are calculated off of the option capacity and not the current capacity of the schools. That yellow column and the enrolled utilization is calculated off of the current 17-18 capacity. So that's something that you can have for reference, so you can see how the options impact building utilization, how they provide relief as it relates to percent utilization of the schools. We've also provided impact data. So option A and B, you can see the total number of students that would be impacted. In option A, 197 students would be affected. And in option B, 255 would be affected. You look at the tables below that, it provides you the more detail in terms of how many students go from where to where. So anything that's in green shows those students who are not affected. The tan line that you see in these tables represents students who were moved. So for instance, in option A, Hawthorne sent 62 students to Edison. Jackson sent 47 students to Lincoln, and then Lincoln sent 88 students to Hawthorne. So it was kind of, you could see a little bit of a give and take to balance utilization. And for the option B zone, it's very similar with the exception of the field adjustment, where in option B we sent 58 students from Field to Edison. And I'll share the maps. I'll show you the maps here after I get done with the statistics. We also have provided feeder pattern data, and this just basically looks at the percentage of elementaries that feed into middle schools. We do have a middle school option to accompany the elementary option in order to preserve the feeder patterns that we see here, and so that's something that I'll show you the feeder patterns. It's basically Lincoln. The Lincoln to Bryan should be 100% feeder progression. So the options for the feeder pattern statistics don't differ between the options. They differ just slightly because we do recommend that you make an adjustment to your middle schools to align with the elementary adjustment. So the middle school statistics are the same, showing the same information, and no assumed change to capacity in our in the modeling that we did, and just a slight change between Bryan and Sandburg in our scenario to align the elementaries with the middle schools. And we have utilization statistics as well. And in this option, that you'd have 48 students. For the middle schools, 48 students would go from Bryan to Sandburg to align with your feeder patterns. So getting to the maps, if you look at the maps here, this is the first map that represents just your current elementary zones, and the background colors represent the attendance area for each particular building. And then when we start getting into the option, the background color is the option, and then we have a black and white dashed outline overlay, so you can get a better idea of which areas were moved. So if you look at this map, option A, you can see area that used to be Hawthorne east of Kenilworth, and it's currently zoned to Hawthorne. In option A, it goes to Edison. So Edison sort of squares off at Kenilworth Road. And then Lincoln sends students north of the railroad tracks into Hawthorne to provide Lincoln that relief. And then furthermore, Jackson needed some relief to balance utilization, and so the Jackson line was moved down one block to Adams Street. The Lincoln line was moved one block down to Adams Street, and those students would go from Jackson to Lincoln in that particular block. And no other changes were made in the district in option A. There were no changes made to Field, Fisher, Emerson, or Jefferson in this model. In this model, it was only impacting Hawthorne, Edison, Lincoln, and Jackson. Option B is very similar to option A. It's just a build. It was started with option A, and then we made an adjustment to give Field some capacity relief. And so this option draws the line at the southeastern corner of the Field zone, south of Schiller and east of Clinton, would go from Field to Edison in option B. But that was just made to try to balance utilization, further effort to balance utilization and give Field some capacity relief. If you look at the middle school zone, the only adjustment is the area that we sent from Lincoln to Hawthorne. That follows, and currently, if I toggle the current map on, this area is currently zoned to Bryan Middle School. And in the option, this area that's zoned from Lincoln to Hawthorne also continues to Sandburg. And that's done for feeder pattern continuity and also balances utilization among the schools. So that, with that said, that's the extent of the information that I have to share with you this evening. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So bottom line, the recommendation, or what they're showing to us, addresses a more balancing of the students across all of our schools, both elementary school and middle school. Is that the bottom line?
Yeah, let me explain what this would accomplish. It would be consistent with some of the initial goals of the master facilities plan. So it's intended to work in conjunction with the long-term planning. It minimizes the amount of people that have to be moved in order to accomplish some of these goals. So you're looking at about 5.7% of our current students ultimately change schools. The majority of those students would go to what is theoretically planned to be schools that would either be new or get major upgrades, with the remaining ones moved to the school that got the most recent upgrade in the last referendum, being Hawthorne. And it would give us the capacity for all-day kindergarten. It would give us the ability to balance class sizes. And because of the length of this project and all the complexities of it, depending on where we would actually go, no current families would be impacted by these moves, because their kids would either have matriculated to the middle schools, or they would have the ability to be grandfathered in if they were 4th and 5th graders at this point in time. So we also have some flexibility built in there. We have future growth of projected over the next 3 years of 1.4%. It gives us the ability to monitor dual language implementation at Fisher, because we do have, and it wasn't shown here, but for example, west of Route 83, those students go to Fisher. Those could be moved theoretically to Emerson. So there are some things in here that, as we monitor dual language implementation in the district, we have some flexibility built in. If we were to add more dual language at other schools, or dual language Chinese or other things like that, we have some potential additional capacity. And if we were to move from the current initial draft concepts of renovating field to a new field, and had the need to slightly downsize the new building because of a construction code zones, different things like that, that option B gives us some flexibility to move a few more students out of that field zone to Edison. And we would have the ability, since this would be down the road, we could theoretically monitor our continued enrollment growth and still have some flexibility built in, because it gets all the capacities of the schools close to being the same in the low to mid 80s, and it also as it relates to Edison, the current utilization looks low. And if there were to be a decision that we would want to cut back the overall size of that project, we possibly could. But our architects, I asked them to double check that, because of the sensitivity of that issue, and the fact that if you look at the capacities, it looks like, why would you build that school that big? If you keep in mind all of the other schools that have movement, have upper grade levels that kids are already entering into, but if we moved several sections of kindergarten to Edison, ultimately over time, as those kids go to higher grade levels, you would see that percentage come into line closer with the other schools. So those are really the rationale behind this, and the way this worked out in a manner that seems, very, very intuitively logical. Was really nice to see that we could accomplish what really, or potentially could accomplish all of really the major objectives behind the overall facilities concept with minimal movement of students.
Just a couple of things. First of all, I wanted to clarify something that Mr. Cropper said that is not obvious to him looking at this map, but it looks like the dividing line between Hawthorne and Edison in this proposed option A is squared off not at Kenilworth, but at York Road.
Yeah, I think he misspoke.
Yeah, just as a matter of...
Sorry,
yeah.
you are correct.
Yeah, it's not obvious when you look at the map. But I just want to make that point of clarification. And Dr. Moyer, you're saying that our present students will be grandfathered to the schools that they're at. How do we, and Mr. Cropper, if you have experience in this, I'd love to hear, how do you work with realtors to make sure that as houses are sold and children move in, that the parents don't have the misconception that their newborn was going to one school when in fact we've redrawn the boundary line and their kid is in fact going to go to another school. I can see where that would cause quite a bit of angst. Do you have experience in that matter?
I do, yes, sir. We, as I mentioned, we do this kind of work for a lot of districts at different capacities, and sometimes it's doing full-blown committee work to doing more internal option development and analysis. But one of the things that's most important, like you, to address one of your concern is making sure that the parents are notified and that they understand how they may be impacted. There's a couple of different ways that you can do that. You could create a boundary study page or a boundary change web page on your website, and you can put a couple of maps of your current and future boundaries, and so that you can tell the story on that web page, and that's something that's good as a resource for parents. Another option is more advanced, and it's something that we do for a lot of clients, and it's an interactive map where you type in an address and it zooms into the area, and it'll tell you if you have been rezoned or not, or if your house was impacted, and you can turn on and off different layers to look at the current boundaries and then the future boundaries. It's a little more of an interactive way for parents and also people like realtors and even school staff members use something like that as a resource to be able to answer questions when they get called on to see if they've been impacted. And so I think that's a more costly approach. It's not substantially expensive, but it's more costly than doing something internally with a web page and a couple of PDF maps showing the two different zones.
Thank you. And then one last just general comment is I'm glad to see that in both plans we have designed, or Mr. Cropper has designed, spare capacity into each elementary school because I'd hate to go about this exercise more than once every few decades.
One thing that I would say about that is I think we would all agree with you on that, number one. But number two, knowing what these boundaries potentially could look like for the elementary schools, if you notice that there was some tentative plans potentially for additional space at Bryan, and so this could affect the overall concept and the ultimate designs that could potentially come out of any ultimate plan. But I don't know if everybody does know this, but Bryan is currently experiencing some space issues. They have the need to put some classes in spaces that are not traditional classrooms and things right now. And so this could address that issue as well, even though that wasn't necessarily our intent going in.
Just more specifically to Jim's question, within the MLS, if you pull this up on Realtor.com, when does the schools that are attached to your listing change? Matt?
Okay, so if the MLS.com adjournment.com and looking at that information, that is typically, that information gets populated based on current boundaries. So MLS.com wouldn't be all that reports is the current boundaries. That wouldn't reflect the new boundaries until the boundary change until the boundary change occurs. What we find is that realtors go to the district webpage that has a link for this interactive site, and they use that as a resource. So it's a separate resource than MLS.com to kind of help them through the transition until it becomes a final boundary.
I guess I kind of beg to differ with you on that one, because I think a lot of people search for houses online and they look them up on realtor.com. But the way this would work would be that we would change the boundaries. That would change the way it appears. So then any person buying the house after that, I'm guessing, right, that before the official boundary change, if you buy your house before the official boundary change, you're part of the grandfathered group. We would set that. The grandfathering would be set at the time the boundaries officially moved, which would then be reflected in any online listing.
We would have to study that, and we would have to develop a plan that everybody was comfortable with. My statement reflected more to the idea that no current student that's at an elementary school, not necessarily the future students. Like if we changed the boundaries and we could tell people what the new boundaries would be, they would know what a tenants area they'd be purchasing a house in.
Right.
And then there would definitely be grandfathering provisions for the upper grade level kids or siblings of upper grade. You know, you'd have to work out that type of a plan.
Yes.
What we would need to do is come to an agreement as a community how we would handle those people that are starting their first several years of school, what the expectations or agreements would be. And if we want to make sure that the plan is that all current families are grandfathered, if once their kids start school or whatever, if that's what the community says it wants to do, then I think that becomes part of the community engagement process, and then we just make that decision as a group that that's the way we're going to handle it. I just believe that my statement was more to the fact that we could communicate in advance, people would know, and that the people whose kids are currently in school right now wouldn't have to worry about changing midstream.
Right. This is more to just Jim's question when somebody bought a house and found out after they moved in. So more importantly, though, we're making some big and expensive decisions based on lines that are necessarily imprecise, I think, given the nature of the data. In my experience, when we've done enrollment projections. One question for you, Mr. Cropper. You've stated the deep experience and expertise with a nice A-list of clients. What's your batting average?
In terms of when it comes to boundary study work?
The projections that you did versus, I'm assuming that given the significant number of years you've been doing this, you may have a case study or two where you've projected boundary loads and then we've seen where it's come out?
We really shoot for the plus or minus 2% through the whole life of the forecast, and we really we stick with that very well. I think you start to get to like usually districts will ask us, they'll call us back up and ask us for an update. It's not always because of we're outside of that 2% threshold, but it's because they just wanted to have a fresh set of numbers for the basis of their budgets and staffing. I would say that, our forecasts have held very well. When you look at a lot of the changes that have occurred and in our economy and things like that, over the last 10 years, it's been tough in this industry because most districts expect a lot of growth, and they expect to see similar growth that they experienced in the early 2000s. And and we've had to tell a tough story, kind of go against the grain, if you will, in a lot of districts and tell them what we're seeing in terms of demographics and that the growth isn't as substantial and it's actually leveling and in some cases declining. And it's been a tough fight because it's hard because it's not following a trend line. But we have hit the trend, and I think in almost every district that we have done, and so it's just what the magnitude of that trend is. So our process is very good, and you'll notice when you look at the boundary options that are presented to you here tonight. I think Dr. Moyer mentioned, or one of the board members mentioned, that there's a balance of utilization, and that's really important when you're doing this work because if you balance utilization and give a number of available seats, and make that equitable across the district, the schools have the ability to adapt to any unforeseen change in demographics. I think that we're seeing your enrollment as fairly stable and not substantially growing or declining. And so creating more even balance of utilization follows along with our findings in the demographics.
Now, is that 2% at the building level or at the district level?
It's at the district level. You start getting down to the building level, you start to get more deviations, and a lot of it's because you're working with a smaller area, and statistically speaking, you've got a smaller sample, and so it's a greater chance for error. And then also there's a lot of things at the elementary school or the school level that are not non-demographic changes that influence our forecast, such as a particular movement of a program or expanding a pre-K program or some expansion of some type of program that we held constant in our forecast. So the district level is what we really look for on the plus or minus 2%. If it starts to deviate at the school level, we typically, when we look at that, it's usually due to things that are mostly non-demographic factors.
Yeah, that's an issue for me because we're drawing lines based on buildings, based on this data. So is there a plus or minus for the building level that you're typically within?
I think it varies from building to building. It can be, I would say, it can be up to 5% in some cases. We usually, if it's a non-demographic, if the schools are left to their devices and you operate with the same type of programs and things like that and don't move programs around, our forecasts are a lot more accurate. But if it does deviate from what's forecasted, that's why it's important to not put too much weight into the forecast and say, for instance, if you see one school is going to decline and one's going to grow, to load a school at 100% and have the other one be at 70%. It's better to have a balance so that the schools can adapt to changing student cohort sizes, because this is what we're presenting here, and these numbers that we're presenting with the boundary study, these are using 17-18 data. Your student enrollment is going to change every year as students enroll in and withdraw and age out and new ones come in, and those cohorts are going to differ. Slightly. So the numbers aren't going to be exactly what we have presented in this, but this is the best method for small area analysis and boundary planning, and creating that equitable amount of available seats gives the district and the administration flexibility to adapt to changing cohort sizes.
Sure, but the reality is these changes aren't going to be done. You said that the accuracy really starts to decline when you get to 4 or 5 years out, correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
The, 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 the accuracy starts to decline when you get 4 to 5 years out, correct?
once you get past 5 years, things, there can be things that we have not assumed that I think the further you go out, the less accurate the forecast will become.
And I guess, and this goes more to you, Dave, and the team that's doing this. So this doesn't become relevant for 3 to 5 years by the time you were to build this stuff, right? And it's at a building level. And so the question I have is I don't think you can draw lines today. I think we need to make sure when we communicate this that it would be prudent to do it once and do it when the buildings are done and ready. Like you said, we'll design these to certain capacities, but those lines may have to be pushed a little bit in order to balance those capacities when these buildings actually come online several years from now, given that this is data that we're making decisions based on that could have a significant margin for error by the time we open the buildings.
Yes, I agree with you. I think that it was very clear to us that people wanted boundaries information on the front end, both the community and the board, because nobody wanted to be in a position where people were saying that information wasn't shared or we didn't know that this was going to be part of the project or whatever. So this is a tentative theoretical concept, may not hold 100%, and definitely agree that we need to communicate that this is likely looks something like this, but could be slightly different, and probably would need to rerun those boundaries a little bit closer to the opening of the new schools. But I think it will be close for the following reasons. The first one is that we felt some enrollment pressure at Jackson, and so we currently are taking into account extra classroom space for all-day kindergarten, plus the fact that music is currently on the stage there. And so that's partially why some of the Jackson students were moved. And if you take a look at like the natural breaks of York and the enrollment trends in the buildings over time, our enrollment in our elementary buildings hasn't fluctuated a ton. Hawthorne's gone down, Jackson's gone up, so there has been some fluctuation, agreed. But because we're landlocked, we don't have as much variance in some of these things as some of the communities where they're building these subdivisions, 1,000 houses at a time or whatever, back in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I think
56.
Well, whatever, yeah. But I agree with you 100% on how this needs to be communicated, and that we need to make sure everybody understands that. But we also knew that people wanted at least an idea of what some things might look like.
And thank you. This is a great tool, and I just want to make sure that somebody doesn't come running back saying, you told me that, and I bought a house here because I have a newborn. This is an iterative process that's going to go on over time. This gives us a sense that you're not relocating thousands of kids to do this, that load balancing is a relatively low number of kids and families. From a policy standpoint, like we talked about, no family's going to be broken up over this, that kind of thing. But I just think it's important that we manage that expectation going in.
To Chris's point, pulling out of the anecdote file, 2006 was the last time this community passed a school referendum. And part of that referendum was to expand Emerson School. And between the time that was passed and then 3 years later when everything was built, Mary Queen of Heaven sold off some land. They built new houses there. The Emerson area became very popular for tear-down builders. And by the time 2009, so just 3 short years later after the referendum was passed, Emerson School was at 100%, actually above 100% capacity. And frankly, I forget if 2 classrooms or 4 classrooms had to be added immediately to Emerson, and 4 classrooms, thank you, Kara, were immediately added. So, I mean, to Chris's point, in 3 years, a lot changes, especially in a town like ours that does have tear-down booms that go from neighborhood to neighborhood, and it's it's Jackson that has had the most recent, and that's why they're under pressure. So, Chris, to your point, we do need to be careful how we communicate this. But my other overall observation is the new boundaries seem to utilize what I'll call the natural man-made boundaries that in this town, railroads, busy streets, and I think they make much more intuitive sense than the boundaries that we currently have.
Yeah, I want to thank you for this information, and we all recognize that this is tentative information, but it helps people to kind of understand what could be or what this might look like. You mentioned some, I'm going to call them forecast assumptions, and you started off talking about those such as all-day kindergarten was built in, and dual language programs. Can you restate some of those forecast assumptions that you started off mentioning?
Yes. A big part of the initial thoughts on how to address the 2 most aging elementary buildings being Lincoln and Field in a master concept for the district, the initial thinking was how do you address those needs and with the ability to get enough capacity for all-day kindergarten. And in the feedback that we've gotten, people did not like the idea of grade level centers or a kindergarten center. They wanted neighborhood schools, and that really, the default with that is in order to get more space, there probably was going to have to be some boundary adjustments. And we thought they were going to be minor, and thankfully it looks like they won't be upsetting the whole apple cart to accomplish some of this. So that was a big one. The other thing was the idea of balancing class sizes. People talked a lot about class size. As long as the existing boundaries are in place, because you have inequities in the different sizes of the buildings across the district and the associated boundaries, you are subject to anomalies and bubbles of students that go through different grade levels. And when you don't have 3 to 4 section schools, it's very difficult to manage that. And you end up adding a lot of extra staff to try to do that, as well as having other associated problems with scheduling support services for students and counselors and things like that. You got people bouncing all over the place. And so we really were looking to accomplish those 2 things as our primary drivers. And then some of the other things I mentioned were just things that being able to monitor the dual language implementation at Fisher for the next couple years and know that there are some potential options there depending on how that evolves. And the idea that if we add additional dual language across the district, we're not maxed out in space. The idea that we wouldn't be moving a lot of students and would have some flexibility to grandfather people and have some long-term planning and communicate with people in advance, what their situations might look like. And then the contingency at Field School, our architects think that they could make that site work if we decided to move to a new concept of making that a new school. But there is a possibility that the new design, when you would get further down the road in the planning process, might necessitate a slightly smaller capacity there. If that were to happen, we have some flexibility with some in that option B that was presented, as well as if Bertaux happens to send us, we're still not 100% sure how many students that's going to bring. And we mentioned the teardowns a couple times. I live in the area north of North Avenue that would currently be in the Field School District. And you drive around that area, and that happens to be an area of a lot of tear downs currently around Field. And like Jim said, you could have some different, that could evolve to different neighborhoods over time. So being able to have the ability to absorb with these schools all having relatively similar utilization, it gives us the ability to buffer some of this potential future growth. We are projecting the next 3 years to get some growth. And whereas many of our other comparison school districts, you'll see in our annual report, we're the only, of all of our comparison school districts, we're the only district that's grown over the last 10 years. All of our other comparators have decreased. And so if we have some future enrollment growth, we have some flexibility built in here so that we would not have to do what Jim suggested, which is to be continuously re-examining boundaries.
Okay, so this accomplishes giving space to all-day kindergarten, making each school about a 4-section school. Is that fair to say?
Some might be closer to 3. For example, if you don't touch Jefferson, that's basically a 3-section school right now. But yes, either 3 or 4.
Okay, so then how does this help, or does it, when you have those bubble, my kids went through Emerson after 2006, there were 29 kids in the class, and you couldn't have opened another section because there wasn't space. So how does this speak to that, or does that not help?
Well, number one, it does take into account the special programs. So the rooms at Jackson, Edison, when Emerson is full-time, and Jefferson, those don't change. And then Jackson goes down a little bit. So that would be more like a Jefferson-sized 3-section school, probably. But with the balance of the boundaries and the capacity, you now will avoid a lot of these schools which one of our speakers spoke to, where you've got 18, 19, 20 students, and then in other schools you've got 26, 27, 28 students. You now, as she suggested, you bring this more to the middle, because if you've got basically 21 students relatively evenly distributed across class sections, if you get 2 more, it now becomes 23 instead of 29 or whatever. So I think a combination of a little bit of extra space and not having some schools completely full and other schools with a lot of capacity allows us to plan for that. I think if this were the current situation and we were doing this right now, you would be able to accommodate exactly what you're asking. So I believe that when the time comes, we would have a plan that, with the extra space in the district, we would have a plan that would be able to make sure that we're not opening up all these schools and boom, we're at capacity right away and we don't have any ability to absorb any new growth.
I think that's it. Thank you. I don't know where the microphone is.
We're good? All right.
I think so. He's on Eastern time, so I'll let him go.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Chris Felton, student fees.
All right, so we talked about the student fees at the last meeting. We're going to talk about them again tonight, but we're not voting tonight. We will vote at the next meeting. So in the students pre-K through 8, we have We have an increase in the pre-K, $12 increase to $103, and kindergarten is an increase $12 to $153. First grade through fifth grade is a decrease of $9, and the 6th through 8 is a decrease of $2. Those fees are all based on actual costs of the consumable items in the classroom, and those costs have been provided as well. The 6th through 8th grade, we pulled out the world language $14 fee that was in the 6th through 8th grade fee. That is going to be a course fee for world language of $14. So that was a change from the last meeting. Instrumental music, because that's for grade 6, is a decrease to $30 from $150, because that goes to 1 day a week next year. And the vocal music similarly goes down to $30 because that will be 1 day a week. It was pointed out to me today that we missed the grades 4 and 5 music fee, so that will be that's 1 day a week after school, so that should be $30 as well. The track and cross country in grades 6 through 8, we provided a middle school athletics analysis as well. There are 873 participants in the Tier 1 sports of cross country and track. So those 873 participants go down $10. The Tier 2 has 305 participants, and that is an increase $30 from 70 to 100. So the Tier 1 net cost participant is about $110. The Tier 2 sports per net cost per participant is about $380. So the concept here is to be about 25% net cost. This also, we are going to do the fee waiver for athletics as well. So before I move on to York High School, is there any questions about the pre-K through 8 fees?
I don't have a question. I just want to clarify. When you say music is 1 day a week, you're meaning it's before school, 1 day a week. They're having it during school every day.
Right.
Just because that...
The before school program is 1 day a week. Yes.
A question on the fee waives is what about the Madison transportation fee? Is that?
The Madison transportation fee, that it's not currently listed as a fee waived. But that really only applies to tuition students.
Can you explain? Just some people may not realize how Madison operates in terms of tuition and...
So the Madison students, I'm not like an expert in it as well. The Madison students, they're maybe you can help me, Kathy.
I enjoyed that for a second, Chris. Sorry, I admit it. So would Susan. So students who reach age 3 that are identified or suspected of having a disability, we connect with early intervention, and those students would be eligible for the school district to begin services as soon as they turn 3, and then students who are identified for at risk we have a blended program. We do leave open spots for community-based students, and they apply to the program, and then based on the number of spots we have available after we serve the students for whom we're required to serve, then those tuition students enter the preschool. And that also allows students to have a typically developing peer within the blended classroom that has both students identified for special education services at that early age, as well as students who may be at risk.
Thank you. That's why the distinction.
Yeah, I had no chance at that. All right, so can we move to York fees? Yes, York, so you want to put that up? Not a lot of changes. We talked about the Algebra 2 fee of $15, which is related to Alex, and then the Chromebook is currently an increase from $300 to $325, but it's a higher version of a Chromebook for next year. The athletic fees, this is a 4-tier system. It was a 4-tier system. We're sticking with the 4-tier system based on cost per participant. The first tier, we've changed this tiers. We've got the boys and girls sports in the same tier, and we've changed the tier structure. The tier 1 goes from $125 to $100, so a $25 decrease. Tier 2 goes from $150 to $155. Tier 3 goes from $175 to $200, and Tier 4 goes from $200 to $250. And the rationale was that based on the cost per participant, and this option is the 20%. So the fee would cover 20% of the net cost per participant, and we will be moving to having the fee waiver apply for York High School the athletic fees, and we're going to change the cap from a family cap to a per student cap. And the cap would be 2 times the Tier 3 fee, so it would be 200 times 2, or $400 per student is the York High School athletic fee cap.
Did you also mention, Chris, I may have missed it if I zoned out for a second there, but the request that people had to have like baseball and softball or whatever you would consider the equivalent male-female sport? He did say that? Okay, yes. I'm sorry. I did zone out. Thank you. Sorry.
We put the boys and girls sports all in the same tiers. Yes. So I think that covers it as far as the York fees. Any questions on that? Right, so we will bring that recommendation to the next meeting for a vote.
Thanks, Chris. And technology update, Dave Smith. And Mark Cohen.
There's another one. Okay. Good evening. I wanted to just talk for a few minutes. Let's go back to the beginning. Not sure how we started at the end. Talk to you for a few minutes about our Mobile Learning Initiative, or MLI. With us here tonight. I have Katie Diebold, instructional coach at York, Stephanie Shimonik from York Science Department, and Jessica Vega from first grade over at Jackson. Jessica was part of our MLI pilot this year in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. Talked to you a little bit about the progress of adding devices for student use at those early grades. Our 2 points for tonight I want to talk to you about first. I would like you to sort of recap the history for you of the MLI program, and then talk to you a little bit about the pilot that we underwent this year and the resulting recommendations. The pilot essentially spanned 3 years, and it lasted from 2012 through 2015. Those of you who were on the board at the time may recall there were 3 different devices that were tested. iPads were tested, Chromebooks, and then a Bring Your Own Device program was tested at York High School. The program was evaluated, and satisfaction with the Chromebooks far outweighed that of iPads or bringing their own device. Bringing their own device kind of fell a distant third. So for 2013-14 school year, Chromebooks were expanded. There were about 200 Chromebooks deployed at York, and then another 200 at our middle school levels, to determine, what it is that we would need in order to be successful launching across the board. In 14-15, instructional coaches were added, but they were technology coaches. The ITC is instructional technology coaches. And then summer Google training was offered, whether it was programs to Leiden High School, EdSurge, some other opportunities. And then the district transitioned from Microsoft to Gmail and Google as its primary modes of operation. In March of 2015, staff were surveyed, and it was decided after the survey, when 93% of the staff favored going to one-to-one, that we would go one-to-one in grades 6 through 12. Why the investment? The investment was done for several reasons. First, the idea that we would transition to digital resources. That process is happening slowly but surely as we go through curriculum review. Currently, about 1/3 of the courses at York High School do not require any sort of a textbook, digital or otherwise. And approximately another 1/3 of courses at York High School use a digital textbook. And the remaining third still use a paper textbook, although some of those resources are done as a classroom set where the students don't have to purchase it. And every time we go through curriculum review, for example, social science and science right now are going through the CDT process of developing courses next year that will then come out in 1920. Those courses are being developed without the need to purchase resources. But the other reason, and the primary driver for the investment in technology, is the ability to do things in a classroom that you could not do without it. And that's the reason why we have these teachers here today, is to talk a little bit about that. The idea that we can have students become better information seekers, that they can evaluate, that they can produce things, be creative in ways that they could not be before. This fits in with our operational plan. We talk all different places of the operational plan about being future ready, about encouraging critical thinking, but creativity, communication, and collaboration. Now, so I know sometimes the prevailing notion about technology is that a young man or young woman puts their face in front of a screen and then they're not talking to anyone at all, right? But in fact, our students are very collaborative in the digital space. In fact, they're able to peer edit documents using Google Docs. They're able to give feedback. They're able to work on projects that are larger, and they're able to do it at times when they're not together. Before, if you were working on a group project, you try and find some time when everyone was available, and you meet at the library at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. Well, now they can be working interdependently, and they can be doing so at all hours of the day or evening. So when they have this device with them, they're better able to work together. As the devices were implemented in 15-16, Chromebooks were purchased one-to-one for students in grades 6 through 12. We expanded to 5th grade the year after, and now this year we are one-to-one in grades 3 through 12. And to talk a little bit about how Chromebooks are being used now at the high school, them having the longest experience with it, I would like to bring up Katie and Stephanie.
Good evening. My name is Katie Diebold. I'm one of the instructional coaches at York High School, and this is my 4th year in the district. I started as one of the original ITCs that Dr. Cohen had mentioned earlier in his presentation. And I'm here tonight to share kind of a snapshot of how technology is being leveraged at the high school. And we've come such a long way since 3 years ago when I was here kind of asking for your support to provide a Chromebook for each student. So I kind of want to highlight some of the work that our teachers are doing and kind of talk about the significant ways that technology is enhancing our students' education. The evidence that I'm going to show you tonight isn't in the form of numbers from a standardized test, because those tests don't measure the things that we talk about, the 6 C's with critical thinking and collaboration and creativity and citizenship. So I kind of want to give you some more anecdotal information. The dream of using technology as a teacher is to use it in ways that really deepen students' learning. And sometimes that happens at that redefinition level that Dr. Cohen mentioned in his presentation, where students are connecting outside of school walls and collaborating with students around the globe. And the other times it's simple, everyday things that make an impact on student growth. One of our English teachers and a coach, Brianne Kennedy Brooks, talked about how her students' writing process has significantly improved with Google Docs. Students are able to be metacognitive about that process and see their writing from start to finish and reflect on it with their teacher. And while that might seem very simple, that's something that's not possible with paper. It's not possible for them to see what they deleted and erased and changed. And all those little intricate details just make that metacognitive reflective process so much more easy. Teachers at York are using technology to figure out where their students are in the middle of a lesson. They're using quick digital formative assessments to figure out, oh, do my students get this yet? Okay, now I'm going to make this change. So they have that ability to collect that data, and it's analyzed for them with something like Google Forms. The graphs are instant. They don't have to go in and grade the papers and look for those things. It happens right away, and they can make quick decisions. As an instructional coach, I've had the luxury of collaborating with some of these teachers to plan lessons, and sometimes I get to facilitate these lessons with them. So I want to highlight 2 very specific classroom examples and show you some of the student work that our teachers and students have been working on. The first exemplar is from Rich Edgley's digital art and design class. Rich came to me early this year and he said, I really want to find some students around the globe and have them create artwork with my students. And he had this really vague idea of what he wanted to do. And so we narrowed it down to some specific themes in our culture and problems that our world is facing. And so he gave his students some options and told them they could choose problems that we're facing, an impact that they can make, or what are some real issues that teenagers face. And so Rich paired up with a classroom in Canada. And this is one example that a Canadian student and an American student created together. So they drew these on the computer and they came up with these themes of issues that teenagers face. And so the example in red on the left is the part that the student at York contributed to. And so these are some of the things that they feel that students in our community face as teenagers. And then the example on the right is the one that Canadian students came up that are issues that students, teenagers specifically in Canada face. So this is kind of just that one example. I talked to Rich a little bit more in depthly about what really has technology done for you in your classroom other than providing this global collaboration. And Rich told me that he's able to skip lessons because his students are coming in with this knowledge that they've gained in middle school of how to use technology appropriately and these skills of how to navigate a digital learning environment. And he's actually able to do more because of it, which this is a theme as I'm working with teachers. I'm hearing them say they just get it now. I don't have to do X, Y, and Z because they've done that at the middle school, and that's really exciting. Now I want to highlight a second exemplar, but I'm going to hold off on showing you the student work because it's a video. This exemplar is from Eric Westerberg's Finite Functions and Finite Math, which is an ACP course at the high school. This lesson is on linear functions. I'm not a math teacher, but Eric told me that this is a very dry topic. It's one that's very mechanical, rather than being something that's easily applicable in the real world. I even remember Eric saying when we were planning the lesson that his department chair would not even come observe of him during this lesson because it's that boring. So he wanted to find a way to help his students apply linear functions to the real world. And so Eric previous to one-to-one technology, he took a very traditional approach to this, teaching linear functions in a very standard way. And he said students could do linear functions, whatever that means in math terms. They could do them, but they didn't know how to apply them into a real world. And so Eric felt really strongly about providing a medium for his students to produce their own problem. And so in order to produce a problem, they had to research problems that industries have where a linear function could solve that. So they had to do the research on their own, they had to define the problem, and also come up with a creative solution. And one-to-one access, this would not have happened without that, all of these phases. So I kind of want to show you a student example. This is a quick 20-second clip of 3 videos. You're going to see some creative things, some funny things, and some math things. So I just kind of wanted to take the best part of each of the videos and show them to you. So Dave, can you play it for me?
I want to call my expert analyst associate.
All right, I got your link and I see the graph.
Great, it's for Jimmy John's. We know the available ingredients and whatnot, and we want to find how many sandwiches they should make if they got to meet the minimum quota.
Okay, you can see that there's a shaded zone right there in the middle. That's a sweet spot where Jimmy John's meets their quota and is using an amount of ingredients that's physically possible.
You gotta be selling the right number of steak burritos, the right number of steak quesadillas, okay?
I'm Steve, owner of Steve's Crack Outlet in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and I need your help.
Steve's Outlet in Myrtle Beach Mall is in desperate need of new shoes shipment. Specifically, he needs to order some more bestsellers, the Lightning McQueen clogs and the original Croc brand flip-flops.
So I hope you enjoy these quick little samples. If you could have seen all the videos, they were so good. These are some of the best videos that I've seen in my 4 years as a coach at York, and it was really, really exciting. And one of the reasons Eric was so successful is that he took time ahead of time to survey his kids and figure out what their strengths and weaknesses were with creative collaboration. Do you know video editing? Do you feel comfortable drawing? Do you feel comfortable speaking? He heterogeneously grouped these students together so that they could be successful. And afterward, Eric shared that the expertise of students was contagious. So they were able to really share their knowledge, and it kind of passed on to their peers, so that was really cool. The crazy thing here is that neither Eric or myself during this lesson taught the students technology. We didn't show them how to edit videos. We didn't teach them how to use a video camera. Eric did the math thing, whatever the math thing was, and I went up there and showed the students how to organize their research with a storyboard. That is the extent of the instruction that they were given, and they were able to create these wonderful products. And I even remember walking by a young girl who said that I get to draw in math class. I never thought I was going to get to draw and be creative in math class, so that was just super exciting. And now Stephanie Shimonik is going to come up from our science department and share how she's using tech in her classroom. Thank you.
So I'm Stephanie Shimonik. It's my 7th year teaching chemistry in York High School, and I'm talking through a little bit more of the teacher perspective and how we feel it's transformed our classroom, since you've seen some examples. And I have to say, looking back 7 years ago versus what I'm doing now, I can't believe what I'm able to do and how enhanced my classroom feels, just from the effect that, you know, I can have students collaborate and outside of the classroom, and you would think that they wouldn't want to, but they actually enjoy it. We can take pictures of like the way models of drawings have done for elements and organizations, and they post up on DotStorming or Padlet, and they're allowed to make comments. So usually we have like 2 things you learned and 1 thing you want to find out the next day. And so it's just a way for them to obviously go on, comment on each other, and then think about what we did that day and bring it back the next day to start. There's other things that we like to do. We definitely try to incorporate some differentiation. I do teach within the ELL classroom as well as the general ed, and And it's easier with we have something called a hyperdoc. And so within that document, I can set up columns based on what type of learner you'd like to be. So I can video myself recording a screencast. I can put a column that has pictures in it. I can have a column with just like PowerPoints from YouTube or something. And then I can put in a column of how you'd like to submit your choice of showing me your student product. So I have one where they can take a picture of their product and then write a description at the bottom, or they can record themselves taking a video and a quick screencastify and plop it into the document, and then they just submit through Classroom. So these are all different things that each student can pick they'd like to do, and then I get it back, and then I can go through and personally provide documentation and stuff to them in order to give them feedback. That's tailored to what they would like to hear. Instead of just using it and being like, oh, okay, the next day I got to go over X, Y, and Z because I know they didn't do well on this. This way it's something personalized to them. The other thing that we like to do too is we have, for a couple of my classrooms, they thrive on online journals. So we use something called Seesaw that they are allowed to choose 4 different ways they want to prove what they learned that day. So we have a quick 30-second video clip, or they take a picture of depending on what we're doing, if we're doing a stoichiometry problem or a limiting reagent, they can take a picture and describe it, or they can create a drawing of it, or they can just write a note. And so every day they like to do that, and I use that a lot in ELL because they like to be a little bit on the side, but they're more comfortable recording to a camera than they are to me, so then I can look at it and then provide them a comment. So it provides a lot of choice of learning, and it provides a lot of differentiation for me, especially now that I teach the different modes. I never thought I'd be able to do what I do now, and I enjoy looking at it and using it as a student example. I like having it in the computer and being able to pull it up when we need, and I just feel that it has really enhanced what we're able to do, and having it for each student gives us that connection within the computer for them. One of the things that a lot of people, when we first started this so many years, were like, oh, what's going to happen when each kid has their own Chromebook? And so we do use Hapara, and Hapara allows me to take quick snapshots of what they're doing, and if I just see that everybody's on whatever page it is, then I know, like, okay, fine, I don't have to bother. Or if I see they have too many browsers open, then I can be like, hey, what you doing? And just make sure that they're on the right page so that we know that they're on that website or on that Seesaw line. And then when we don't need it, we do place them away, and then they know it's just move on to whatever, because we do labs, so we don't want them bringing them back there in case it gets ruined. So they know when to have them out and when not to. So that's, for the most part, I feel that I don't know what I would do without it now. Now that I have, I think back 7 years ago, and I know we had none of that, and now I have it all at my hands, and I think it has enhanced much of learning within the classroom. So thank you.
So seeing the success that we have at our upper grades, now we're rolling down into kindergarten, first grade, and second grade. And Dave Smith came to me earlier on this year and said, you know, as we get ready to roll out devices, we could easily get every child a Chromebook. That's something we've been doing. We know Chromebooks, but what if a Chromebook's not necessarily the best device to interact with our youngest learners? Our youngest learners might have different needs and might be being taught in different ways. And so, you know, we don't want to have that one approach, you know, one-size-fits-all approach to the devices that we brought in. So Edison probably undertook the greatest leap. They brought in a Windows touchscreen device similar to a laptop. It ran Windows 10, but it was convertible into a tablet. So it had the benefits of being able to use the Google Suite, but also using the Microsoft suite of products. Jackson School used iPads in kindergarten and first grade. And Emerson then used the touchscreen Chromebook that we currently have deployed at third grade and some of our other grade levels. I brought in Jessica Vega, a first grade teacher at Jackson, to talk a little bit about her experience with the iPads at Jackson.
Right. Well, I'm Jessica Vega, first grade at Jackson. This is my 4th year as first grade. So I've never used technology in first grade, and this was my first year to pilot, and it was amazing. It's really surprising to see what 6 and 7-year-olds are capable of doing. Personally, I think the iPad is the best fit for them because, actually I have one up here, it's super light. They are so used to the applications because many of them do have iPads at home. I can quickly, through Apple Classroom, that's an Apple product on the app, can quickly pop up the app that I want them to be on. Or I have some shy kids with who don't like to speak in front of people. So all their projects they can speak on here through Seesaw like they used in the upper grades. The writing that I get out of kids using the iPads has been amazing. I've never seen kids so excited about writing, making books, all the digital animation that you can add to it. This week and last week I started Keynote, which is an app on Apple through all the Apple products, and that you can add animations. They were like, oh my God, this is so cool. This is awesome. They're like, can I print this? I'm like, yeah, but you're not going to have the animations. Like, I don't care. I'm just really happy about my book. And actually that came from one of my kids who's below grade level, and it's just amazing to see like he's inspired to write. Other than that, the imagination, creativity that I've gotten out of them has been amazing. They love recording themselves. They love explaining their math problems. And it's just so friendly user for them, and I'm glad to have them, and I'm really excited and hopeful that we will get them for next year.
I had the opportunity to observe Jessica's first grade classroom as her students were making Google Slides about their fourth grade buddy. Fourth grade, correct?
Their other first grade buddy, but...
Oh, their other first grade buddy. So they were making Google Slides about there's this other person with the photo and answering questions, and so they're still able to interact with the Google Suite. You can pull it up on pretty much any device. So really the difference between the devices, Apple tends to have a more robust the App Store on Apple is far more robust, and so their use of applications rather than just relying on traditional browsers is a little bit more well developed. Chrome, on the other hand, the Chromebook has basically kind of cornered the education market. You guys know that Tim Cook from Apple was at Lane Tech High School not that long ago, I believe it was just a week ago, highlighting the iPad for education. The reason why is they're getting clobbered in the education market. A little more than 60% of the devices that are in schools nationwide are Chromebooks. Less than 20% are iPads, and a smaller number that students have as one-to-one devices are Windows-based. And so they realize that the children are the ones purchasing the devices over the next 20 years, not necessarily the adults. And so they see the writing on the wall, and they want to get these devices in the hands of kids. So, but going back to the pilot, we surveyed teachers, we asked them for their feedback, and really this was sort of across the buildings, and even the buildings that didn't pilot, when we asked them out of the 3 devices, which ones would you prefer? iPads were definitely the preferred device at kindergarten and first grade for our pilot schools. Touchscreen Chromebooks, however, were universally accepted as the second grade device. There wasn't anybody that really felt that staying with the iPad second grade and beyond was the way to go, because of the fact that the device, the Chromebook, does come with a keyboard, and it does retain some of the functionality of the tablet. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but these Chromebooks can be completely flipped around, used as a tablet. It was interesting, though, to see the kindergartners interacting with these devices at Emerson during their trial. One kindergartner said that it was annoying that she had to hold down the shift key and then the letter to get it to be uppercase. That's why she liked using her iPad at home. You don't think about things like a kindergartner. They're very honest. And if you can picture me sitting on one of those little itty bitty chairs and all the kids sitting on the rug, and that alone would be worth its own video. Teachers recommend a device ratio of 2 to 1. They did not feel it was appropriate or necessary to have a 1-to-1 device for kindergarten, especially since in a half-day program, we don't want to spend a tremendous amount of time in front of the device. But once we got them into the building, 1-to-1 was recommended at second grade. Once we had them there for a full day. The pilot schools were mixed about the appropriate ratio. Some said 2 to 1, some said 1 to 1, but the majority of teachers outside of those pilot schools at the other 5 buildings preferred to have that 1-to-1 ratio. Some of the comments that came back in the feedback about creativity are listed here, and I don't want to read them all to you, but you can see the yellow. What I highlight in yellow are all apps, which is one of the reasons why when we looked at the iPads versus the Chromebooks, we do look a little bit favorably on the iPads because of the applications and the ability to open up applications for students from the teacher's device. So kindergarten and first grade, Jessica can simply push that application open on the device rather than spending a bunch of time telling her students how to get to X, Y, or Z.
To add on to that a little bit, I know she talked about...
Sorry. That's okay.
To add on to that, I know they talked about Hapara, but through the same app, it's called Apple Classroom, I can look at their screen and see what they're doing. So and I can lock their screen too, and that's how I get people's attention during guided reading or reading workshop, which those earlier teachers talked about. While I'm with my guided reading group, if they're independent reading with their iPad, I'm like, oh, so-and-so, you're not on the right app, and they're like, oh, she actually locked my screen. So there's a lot of control through that iPad, which is nice.
And we already talked a lot about creativity. Again, the device ratios. Once we get students into first grade, these are the comments about being one-to-one. Having Seesaw, it's much easier. And really, if we're going to have students on a device on a regular basis, one of the things we did encounter, especially at the lower grades, you don't deal with as much in high school, keeping the touch screen clean with all the little fingers and their snack and all that kind of good stuff. So keeping that touch screen clean and keeping it free of germs is something you consider at the primary grades and maybe you don't think about with the older students. And again, the device type, it was pretty much universal that second grade was the year for Chromebooks, but that the lower grades, kindergarten and first grade, would benefit from having an iPad. So that leads us to this recommendation that we would deploy a 2-to-1 student-to-device ratio at kindergarten, which actually would be slightly less than that when you consider that sometimes we don't necessarily, we may only have, if we're going 2-to-1, but if we have, let's say, 2 sections of kindergarten at Edison, we only need 2-to-1 for the biggest section of those 2. So really, it's almost a 4-to-1 ratio device to student at that building. But then starting in first grade, we 1-to-1 with iPads with no keyboards at this time, and then touchscreen Chromebooks deployed at grade 2. This is the first time that the district would be going in the direction of using an Apple device rather than a Chrome device, but I can tell you that Google Chrome and the Google Suite work very well, really, regardless of the device. All you need is the browser. But just the size, the durability of the plastic case that surrounds the device that we acquired with it, I believe lends itself better to students of that age. And then we have one other video to show at this.
Sorry.
That's okay?
I was so enamored with your
Oh, thanks, Dave.
I think this is the one.
Yep.
It's a little intimidating in the beginning, but once you start using it and trying to just apply little bits here and there, then your toolbox just becomes bigger and you feel more comfortable and you can pick, like, I know that the hyperdeck might work for this lesson better, or I know that I need some differentiation and I have students who are way ahead, so I can use that to push them in different directions. Now students are able to turn in work individually, so like we just did a Google drawing, so the students did their own drawings, and then I was able to get them on my computer, not just generally go over it, but now I can make student personalized feedback outside of class. They get an email or a notification it's returned, and then they can see like what I've done on their drawing.
Was just basic apps for them to do. And we showed them how to do some apps on there, working on just regular websites, Raz Kids, Core 5, Zern. And then we started planning in extra programs. We've done a lot on Google Classroom with them, where we assign them projects, we push something out, and we make them kind of challenge projects. These are extra credit. And most of the kids, can I go on it? Can I do that? Can I do the extra credit? Whereas if I were to say, okay, paper pencil, go research a plant. No thanks. They can't wait to get out of Chromebooks and do that.
They're more motivated to do math work, writing work. They're so excited to post their work. And also has helped my students who don't like talking in front of other people. So they record themselves about their artwork or writing or math, and it allows other people to hear their voice when they're afraid to in front of the class. And I really do see their creative side, where paper and pencil, it's just boring, and then iPads allow creativity, which is great to see.
excited about learning, it's just the way to do it. We gotta meet their world.
It's interesting that the iPad was developed in 2010, which you would think how much that tablet computer has changed our culture over the last 8 years, what the impact it's had. But if you think about the oldest child in this pilot does not know a life without an iPad and that technology. So it really has become just sort of an invaluable tool in the teacher's toolbox. At this point in time, we'll entertain any questions on the presentation.
I have one about the presentation, then circle back to me at the end because I have a tangential one as well. But have you had any experience in transitioning from first to second grade from that iPad to that Chromebook? Is that seamless because they're in second grade?
We've talked a lot about this. If you've ever given a child your phone, it doesn't matter what model phone it is, what type it is, they figure it out like that. So I would dare say that any of the pilot devices, once the students got in and once they were logged in, they were off and running. They really were off and running. So the transition between first and second grade, really the biggest thing that they'll access in first grade and kindergarten that they don't really regularly access prior to coming to D205 is Google. And it's the Google Suite, Google Classroom, Google Drive. But they'll be using that on the iPad. So really none of that environment changes. The only difference is going to be that their device will have a keyboard now.
I hear all the wonderful things that technology has brought. Has there been anything that people have said that they missed that I hear conversation about, this is at the younger levels, cursive writing, and that's going away and what that has done. Is there anything like that people are saying they're missing because of this technology?
It's funny you bring that up. Last week at EC5, we were just planning on how we're going to comply with the law and make sure we're teaching cursive writing. So cursive writing is not going away, but really the way in which students communicate, this is the way they communicate now. So, this is the tool of the 21st century. And you wonder what the devices are going to be like just in 10 years after how far they've come in the last 10. This year's kindergartners are going to retire in 2080. 62 years from now, right? 5 years old, they retire at 67, 2080. Just think about what they're going to be using then. So, really, I'm not too worried about what they're losing. Drawbacks, I can't say I encountered any. The only drawback I had was when can we get them here? They can't get here fast enough. So.
Yeah, and I'll second that. I was at a seminar. They had this interactive wall, and this woman put her baby down to go talk to somebody, and everybody was marveling. This kid in this little circle started to figure out how to use the wall at age 3. It was just fascinating to watch. They were talking about what your customer's going to look like someday. Question, and we talked a lot about engagement here and about how it really fosters engagement. Can you talk a little bit about how you get to differentiated and personalized learning? And I know there's some of that going on, but where are we on that curve?
Well, it can be everything from as simple as a computer adaptive program at the early grades that allows them to, solve easy problems, makes the problem more difficult, and to sort of target their level, up to when they get older. Now you can pursue a passion. Now you can pursue a topic that interests you in a mode that interests you. So people can, be given an assignment. I want to know about this, but how you determine the work product, as the example, that's up to you.
And I guess this question is probably more for you guys. Just what do you see from a differentiation standpoint? How much penetration is that into the classroom, or where are we kind of on that adoption curve?
So when I think about differentiation, I don't just think about technology. I think about the content, process, and the product. And that can happen with or without technology. At the high school specifically, we've been working on providing a strong background for our teachers in differentiation. We're currently in our 4th Lunch and Learn, where we've been talking about different aspects, starting with quality learning targets and moving on to formative assessment. Okay, now that we have this data, how do we react to it? And so a lot of where the technology comes in is providing either the resources for the students to differentiate the process. Maybe they want to watch a video or read an article, or maybe they need to be in different groups, and some of the students are on their Chromebooks where other students are working one-on-one with a teacher. So a lot of it really is about the planning and not necessarily just the technology. But Stephanie also talked about how technology can be used to have students differentiate the product that they're using to demonstrate their learning. So the technology makes all those things possible, but they aren't but technology is not differentiation, it's what makes it possible. Sure.
Great, thank you. One last one. Just resource-wise for the teachers that are using this, I mean, they're incredible tools. We've tried to provide some resources, and thank you. How do you guys feel from a resource standpoint vis-a-vis our ability to provide professional development and support for these teachers?
That's ongoing. That's constantly ongoing. I would say the technology landscape is not one that stays static for very long. So we're very fortunate to have the coaches that we do that bring that to teachers, that help share ideas. So the professional learning is always ongoing. It really is just a matter of trying to keep up, which is difficult day to day when you're going from, if you're in season and you're coaching and whatnot. But no, I would say the resources we have, we're always kind of culling the list of things. Dave and I have talked a little bit in the past about, well, maybe, could we use the Google Classroom instead of Apara in the future? Could we look at, integrating something into a learning management system that would, better integrate some of these different systems that we currently have? So we're always looking at that. Right now, I would say our resources are pretty robust. We just need to keep refining how we implement them.
So do you see at the elementary level, we still have those computer labs, right? Do you see those phasing out as this ramps up? Or
now that we'll have devices in the hands of children, we will no longer need the computer labs, and that space and those devices will be repurposed.
And I just wanted to say, I love all this, and I think, technology does amazing things. I think especially for when you're trying to differentiate or help kids, particularly with special needs, they seem to latch on to technology a lot. But how do you kind of keep that balance of not everything should be technology? There still needs to be, I like the thinking behind the kindergarten isn't having a lot of time with an iPad because they're only there for a couple hours. So how do you kind of balance and help maintain a balance across the district so everybody's not on a device all the time?
Well, I want to say that's if you think about technology as being what you use, then you're thinking about the wrong thing. You really need to think about outcomes first. Right, so what are your student outcomes? What is the objective you're trying to teach? What are your outcomes? And from there you decide, how do I want to deliver this material? What's my plan to deliver this material? And then you choose the tool with which to do it. The technology is an accelerator, isn't a driver. So really it still comes down to the pedagogical decision that every teacher makes, that this is, these are the standards we have to cover. This is the assessments that we're going to use to measure whether or not the students have learned what it is that we want them to learn. This is how I'm going to plan out to deliver that instruction. These are the tools that I'm going to use to deliver that instruction. Still just a tool. It's the fourth thing on the list in terms of what it is that we use, the decision process.
I'm trying to get a sense of, and I sent a question about what does it look like before and after application of technology, and as it relates to kind of the SAMR model. But I'm thinking back on the last presentation about the reading and how the teachers really kind of gave me a sense, or us a sense, but I could visualize more of how do they go from the old to the new. And they're doing it through the PLCs, and they're doing it at grade levels in school, et cetera. I'm not sure I see how it's happening from an application of technology standpoint, and maybe it's because that was specific to reading, and it was a specific application versus all the subjects that Jessica and her peers in elementary school have to teach. So I'm trying to get a sense of, how do we get all the teachers, right, ramped up on technology at various levels that they are for all the subjects, and how do you change the the learning, but the teaching, and how do you present it, and how do you know how to move from the old to the new? Can you give us a sense of how that's happening?
Well, I can tell you, when I've gone into grade level classrooms at Jackson, I see, when I see students reading, some of them are reading a textbook from the guided reading library. Others are accessing the digital books that are available through their library via their device. So some students prefer to have the paper book in front of them. Some of them prefer to, be able to search through all the titles and pick something that's, and click on something and then scan it. And if they don't like it, they go to the next thing. So they are, the teachers, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, are going to have to adapt. This is going to be their first time they've large scale used it. Some of the teachers in the pilot feedback have said that they very rarely use technology because with 1 or 2 Chromebook carts for 3 grade levels, it's very difficult to have access on a regular basis, and it's more of a hindrance to do it than it has been to have it. So it's going to continue to evolve at those grade levels. So, in terms of how it does it assist reading, now again, it's another tool in the toolbox.
One thing, Karen, I would add, I think you were getting at this a little bit, we build a lot of this into the District 205 University, and a lot of those classes are taught by teachers, at the peer level, and we also have adopted one of our institute days where teachers can model different things that they're doing in their classrooms for other people, and people sign up for sessions. And so we do some of that. We do some lunch and learns, and we do most of our tech coaches are actually, or most of our instructional coaches are actually very tech savvy, so they're actually working with teachers in their classrooms on a real-time basis, and we'll confer with them during prep times when they're planning lessons and those types of things.
Okay, so there's summer stuff, there's throughout the school, there's PLCs, there's building, et cetera. Okay, that's a good.
So first of all, my first observation is you guys are doing a great job. This is absolutely the way we should be going. I think the quote of the evening is the teacher in the video who said, "We have got to meet kids in their world." So thank you. Thank you for all of your efforts. And I have, Dr. Cohen, I have a couple of observations that I've discovered in the last few days. I had to get my tax records together last week and discovered that my family had written a check. My daughter is a freshman at York, so at the beginning of the school year, we wrote a check to Beck's Books for $960. I think we started requiring, and I think that included the Chromebook, I'm not sure, but it was about 4 years ago, we asked our families to buy a Chromebook, and as part of the deal with our community is that I told them they'd be spending less on textbooks. That check was only $40 less than the check we wrote freshman year for her older sister, who's 6 years older when she was a freshman at York. So my first question is, and I guess my second observation is I've had the opportunity now for the first time in my life to actually drive my daughter to school for the last 4 days. And she's 4 feet 11 inches tall, and before I came to the board meeting, just looking at her backpack that she hauls in there every day, I weighed it. It was 35 pounds. That's approaching a third of her body weight. Great training for the Green Berets. But my observation is I'm not sure we're keeping our deal that we made with the community 4 years ago.
I agree with you. I will say this, when I looked through the presentations that were brought to the board from several years ago, one of the preferred models to get away from paper books was digital books. And at the time, digital books were priced very reasonably. But in the last several years, the cost of digital books has escalated as publishers have realized, holy cow, we've got to find a way to make money somehow, because it's not just swapping the print cost for the cost of a CD anymore. So the cost of digital books has made the savings that we anticipated by using digital text, it's really cut that back. So The development of resources in-house is really the only way to do that, using open resources and then teacher-developed resources. And again, I can tell you the science and social science departments are going through that process right now. I don't think we'll be able to completely get away from novel costs, those smaller ancillary costs in the English classes, and you'll still have some advanced placement and ACP classes that require textbooks, certainly not at the freshman level. So, we need to do a better job of that, and that's something we are continuing to work on. Anytime we revise curriculum, we are going through that process and trying to develop those resources. But it takes some time to try and develop something that would take the place of a textbook. It's gonna be a little bit, but we're working on that. Like I said, the social science curriculum and the science curriculum, as we develop those two simultaneously over the next year, we're working to start picking courses off that list that require a textbook.
So Jim, I can, based on your last comment, I know why you're still here tonight now. The magic date finally came.
It did.
I think that there was a little bit, I want to comment, and I believe I'm generally speaking that this is a fairly accurate comment. I think that there was some confusion when the high school administration changed about the expectations, and I think that there was some lack of clarity in some of the teachers at the high school about what we meant by open resources and the fact that digital textbooks weren't necessarily what we were looking for in terms of the general movement. And I think that there's a much greater understanding now of both the expectations and the need to develop a plan. I'm disappointed a little bit that the community has not realized yet what we had promised them, but the expectations, I think, are clear that as Mark pointed out, the various different future curriculum work, all those kinds of things, the expectation is we reduce our reliance on traditional textbooks wherever possible.
Yeah, I bring it up just because we did make that commitment a few years ago, and I just want to retain focus on it. Another thought, having a kid in college, universities have certainly a different approach. The bookstores rent the textbooks, and it greatly reduces the costs for families. As something to consider as we fine-tune what we're asking the community in a referendum, I realize that it's a big capital commitment, and we have outsourced the bookstore, but I just wonder if there's a way for maybe the finance committee to explore ways to lease instead of buy textbooks. I'm just throwing that out there to give Chris something to do.
I will say that my kids, there's digital rental, so that's substantially less than the digital textbook. So they're able to rent a text for a course for a semester at like $40. For the book's like $250.
Exactly.
And I think that's part of Bex, and part of the reason we talked at Bex is because they go out and negotiate that kind of stuff for us. So it's something to, I guess, put on the agenda for discussions for Bex as we go into next year. But effectively, the buy-sell arrangement, unfortunately, you're out the capital in the meantime, but the agreement to buy back the book is equivalent to renting it, but you have to lay out the cash. So we can definitely take it, although I don't want to be in the business of buying a bunch of paper books.
Right. And I agree, but you're asking families to have a significant capital outlay basically to finance the inventory of books. And we also leave our families hanging when we drop the textbook. We find you can't really sell it back. So, again, something that should bubble to the top every once in a while and take a look at it and think about, is there a better solution?
I just wanted to thank you all for sharing the application of the technology, because we said the first year that we were entertaining, it was about the classroom and changing the learning and the teaching in the classroom. So, thanks to you all for being here at 10:25 and sharing this with us, because that's the testament. But thanks to all of the staff who's readily taking on technology and changing learning and teaching for us and our students.
Just want to thank also Sandy Wenig, who couldn't be here tonight. She was at Science Olympiad, and Dan Cultra, who allowed, at Churchwell, who allowed us to be in their classrooms to videotape, and then Kate Alt, who's been doing a great job in communications putting this together.
Okay, we have one item on the consent agenda, personnel report.
Dave Smith said he'd make this fast.
Oh, they're sorry. Dave, you have an update. Okay, go ahead. I didn't realize there were two things.
Okay, I apologize for having to do this to everybody tonight, but I'll get through this as quickly as possible. This is the dry stuff that's behind all the wonderful things that you guys have heard about tonight. So I will move through it relatively quickly, and then, of course, I'll be happy to clarify or answer any questions. Let me just grab something over here.
This is what we do every April. We come back at the second meeting in April and make sure that people know what we're looking at with.
Yeah, well, I'll update you on our plans, and then I'm going to come back and hit you up with some recommendations on the 24th. So basically, I'm just going to go through a flow of people, process, product, and price, just to kind of cover different themes about the technology, what's happening in technology in the district. And I do want to acknowledge briefly the people behind all this work. This is the list of people that do all the work for everything. End user support, system support, network server stuff, the Power School team, you've got the AV media folks. That's it. And actually a couple of those folks, one's retired and another one's actually in the maintenance department. So really, it's a small number of people that support 15 buildings, 10,000 end user pieces of equipment, millions of dollars of infrastructure. I'm just saying so I think we're doing, everything we can to support the district with, as thin a staff as we possibly can. And I want to also thank and acknowledge that team. They do a great job. Just to give you an idea of what we have focused on this year for keeping ourselves, sharpening the saw, is you can see a few things, some key points like Apple is up there, and that's going to be definitely beneficial for us as we move forward with the iPad work. But we also have other Apple devices around the district. But there's some certifications in there. There's Jamf, which is a tool to help with mobile device management for iPads. There's Power School University. There's a lot of different types of training across the department for different people. So we're always trying to keep our people sharp on their technical skills. Okay, so I'm going to talk about process a little bit here. This graph, this diagram isn't really meant for anyone to really study or understand, but it's really just a depiction of the complicated environment and complex environment that we have in District 205. It's the systems and tools that we have, and the arrows represent data flowing around that my team is really behind a lot of these data flows and maintaining these systems. There's one of the well, so so that's just a representation, just to give you an idea that there's a lot going on. But what we're working to improve that picture. So some of the things that we're working on, and a lot has been done over the last couple of years especially, but we're automating a lot of those data transfers as much as possible. If you had seen that graph a few years ago, the red, green, and blue arrows mean different things, but red is bad because that's manual work. Green is good because that's automated data flows. So that graph had a lot more red arrows in it before, a lot of manual work. And as the bullet under the automation piece says, they were manual, sometimes time delayed and error prone. I used to get calls from teachers or schools that would say, hey, I just had some new enrollments, and when are my students going to be in this system or that system? Those calls never happen anymore. Those kids are in those systems sometimes within minutes after their enrollment in Power School, certainly within hours. So we've made a lot of improvements with that. We've used different technologies, which you can see them up there. And we're also exploring new ways and new areas to improve some of those areas where we still have a lot of manual work going on. So for example, with the phone system upgrade, which I'll talk about later, we want to be able to, when an employee is entered into Active Directory, which is our database of our staff, the phone system would automatically get notified of new staff showing up or staff leaving, whereas today, literally today, and all these years we've had it, I've had to have somebody in my department doing that manually. So we are continuing to push, and we're not giving up on improving how we simplify the environment and make it easier for people. The second bullet about single sign-on is just how do students and staff get into these systems? If they have to remember a login and a password for every single system, that's crazy. So we're trying to make it where if they're already authenticated in our environment, they can pass through seamlessly if possible without having to re-sign in again. So we're working on a lot of that. That's kind of a work in progress. We also issued an RFI, or a request for information, to hear from vendors about opportunities that they think they have to help us consolidate some of these systems and simplify our environment. So I'm working with Mary Ann Lemke quite heavily. I mean, she and I have had probably 10 or 15 conference calls with different vendors just this year, just since the fall, to try to figure out ways, and Mark Cohen mentioned learning management systems, so try to figure out ways to bring in maybe some new systems, but they would help simplify and consolidate. So we are working hard on that. There were some questions I received before the meeting about what's the cost of not doing that. Well, the cost really is effort. It's just a lot of manual effort if we don't do that work. And also, I think some of the cost is errors and having delays in students and teachers having access to systems, and that just gets in the way of learning. So really, there isn't really a dollar cost so much as just a manpower cost, and also I think just getting in the way of students and teachers having access to the systems they need. So we are just continuing that effort. I just wanted the board to know that's an ongoing, and we do it as we can, and we try to find opportunities to streamline. I'll mention at the bottom, and you've seen this before, but the technology survey we put out every year, we value that feedback, we look at it, and we act on it. We come up with new ways to do our work, and we try to provide the best service we can to the district. So that's kind of that whole plan, do, study, act cycle that many of you are probably aware of. So that leads to these graphs I want to share with you. You've seen these before, probably seen them every single year you've got on the bottom axis there. But right now, if you look at the upper left, we're at probably about 11,000 end user devices. This is just the computers, the iPads, the Chromebooks, the laptops, the desktops. It doesn't include other things like, projectors and smartboards and whatnot. So you're looking at like 11,000 end user devices right now. If you look at the graph just to the right of that, the tech support FTE, the red bar across the top is showing that we've been flat. The 7.5 is just the end user support team plus the AV media folks. So obviously that's not my whole department, but the rest of my department has also been flat. So the FTE for tech has been basically flat all those years. The blue line underneath that represents the turnover rates, and I think we're seeing some improvement in turnover. In other words, less turnover, so that we're retaining people, which is helpful because you don't have to retrain and so on. On the lower left, tech support tickets. There was a dip in tickets, and there's probably a couple different reasons for that. One is we changed our ticketing system, and I think we lost some continuity with people being able to sort of knowing how to enter tickets, but also we had that may be one of the major contributors. It also could be that we just had some fewer issues that became tickets. However, you can see in the red line, though, that we had a hard time keeping up with them, which is kind of hard to explain. I think we lost our focus a little bit there. We had a leadership turnover with the team, and also our focus is more on kind of like the team environment and some other things, and we lost, I think, track on our ticket focus. But you can see, though, that we've made significant progress. We've reorganized how we focus on tickets, and so that's really had a major improvement, and we're back down to like a level that's more acceptable, that we're more used to in the district. So I'm pretty happy about that. Lastly, the customer satisfaction graph had a long stretch where we were really struggling around the 4 out of 5. We had our own internal goal of 4.5, which we hit for a couple years, but we're eking our way back up there. So I'm really happy with the effort that my team has put into listening to the feedback, figuring out new ways to do work, and providing the best service that we can to the district with the same resources, human resources that we've always had. we've talked about this already. Now where I'm switching into the product phase of the presentation, I won't basically just highlights what Mark had covered before with the Chromebooks in grade 2 and iPads at different ratios in K and 1. Also, just to point out the Chromebook, the second bullet down, we are always, every year, we're going to be cycling through and introducing new Chromebooks. That just comes with the territory now that we're one-to-one everywhere. We're always going to be having new refreshes going through. And this chart represents that. So the boxed in area represents next school year. And you'll see that we'll have the iPads in K and 1, which are the first two magenta, I guess, rows. And then touchscreen Chromebooks in grade 2, and then some new touchscreen Chromebooks also. I'm showing grade 3, but we're kind of shifting things around, but there'll be four grade levels of new devices in elementary next year. And then if you drop all the way down to the other magenta line, that's the grade 9 class. So all the other classes, grade levels will be running on existing devices. So we'll have a total of 5 grade levels of new devices next summer. And then the following summer, if you look at the blue in the center, the middle schools will get new devices. Presumably there'll be touchscreen Chromebooks, and then again the grade 9 level will have new devices. So it's looking like we'll have about 4 to anywhere from 3 to 5 grade levels any one given year cycling through with the Chromebook purchase. So, and I've got my own graphs that go beyond this year, but I'm just showing you the next couple of years. So we're trying to cycle through those in some systematic fashion. Next year, the Chromebooks, some of the new features are the dual camera, meaning when you flip them around, like Mark Cohen showed you, there's a camera on both sides, so you can kind of do like you can with an iPad, where you can video in either direction. That's kind of, I don't know why suddenly it's new, but it's new with Chromebooks. Much better processors, a new universal charger, which may sound really boring to you guys, but for people like me, when every device has the same kind of charger, you won. You just won, because all your carts can be the same and everything. Because I mean, every time you get a new device, you got a different plug. It's crazy. So that's becoming more universal. The grade 6 to 12 tech fee remains the same, and TSI is still there, but again, with more devices, the thought being that we may have to rely on other sources for repairs if needed, but I mean, I'm not predicting that we'll have to do that, but it's in the back of my mind that we may have to offload some repairs if necessary. Some of the major projects we're working on this summer, upgrading the voice over IP system and the phones. And what's behind that is our system is the servers and the software. A lot of the hardware that we have for servers is really at end of support, and we need to move on to new hardware. The software is also lagging behind on the version, but the phones themselves they're either purchased around when the referendum, so they're around like 2002, 2003 timeframe, or there was a round done about 2008. When I got here, we also did the EC8 buildings. So the phones are 10 to 15 years old, and we're having a hard time. They're starting to fall apart. Some of them don't really function well. So I'm going to be recommending that we really sort of do a forklift upgrade. Now that can be, well, I'll get to that in a second. So that's a pretty major project. There's some servers and storage that we're going to be upgrading this summer. There's over 3,000 student devices between the Chromebooks. There's a bunch of labs at York that are long in the tooth, and then the middle school project Lead the Way laptop cards. And then there's about 300 or so staff devices. So we have a lot of device work this summer. This is kind of a heavy summer for that. And then there's just some battery, UPS batteries. And then the decommissioning of the K-5 labs, we touched on. The principals are all for it. We're going to open up those labs. We'll redeploy those devices. We have ideas for that, and then we probably will leave some behind for each area, because those lab spaces will, I'm not sure what the term's going to be called, but they're like creativity spaces or STEM areas, or I'm not sure what the maker space areas. So there will be probably a few of those devices left behind, so they can do some research and some things in those labs on those devices. But for the most part, we're going to pull out those rows and rows and rows of computers and do other stuff with them. Phone system upgrade, again, this is a big ticket item, so I'm just going to mention it in a slide here. I talked about the servers and the phones it's just time. The PRI circuits we have, which, not to be too technical about it, but those are old-fashioned copper lines, and the vendors don't even want us on there anymore. So we're moving over to SIP trunk or other circuit technology for the voice. And then there's opportunities with the upgrades for some safety and voice enhancements, such as soft phones, which run on laptops, or the mobile clients where you can make actual Elmhurst 205 phone call from your cell phone. So I could call from my cell phone, or a teacher can call from their cell phone, make a call to a parent. It says Elmhurst 205, right? They're using their personal cell phone, but it's actually just an extension of our phone system, and then the parents don't know what all the teachers' cell numbers are, so I think that's a plus. And there's other safety possibilities for interworking phones with the pager systems and things. So we're working on what kind of features can we enhance safety scenarios here. We've talked about it in the safety and security committee meetings with the police and the fire department. So these are some of the things that the new phone system should be able to help us with some of these capabilities. I've been doing a lot of cost analysis. The bottom line is whether we go, and by the way, we're looking at both cloud-based, cloud-hosted solutions and replacing on-prem. So we're really trying to be open-minded and looking at, how can we do this? What's our solution space? But either way we go, as far as I can tell from working with the multiple vendors, the cost for this is about $1 million to $1 million plus over 10 years. You might have a higher startup cost with the on-prem, but then it's got a flatter recurring cost. So basically there's a crossover point around 6 years or so, I think. We'd be better off with cloud-based in terms of just cost for about 6 years, but then it's gonna catch up with you eventually. So there's some decisions that we need to make about how we want to proceed on that. Just to be honest with you, what I'm kind of leaning towards is doing an on-prem upgrade right now and going the more traditional route, and then before you invest in any more hardware or software down the line, you relook at the hosted versions and you say, has the pricing model changed enough that the trajectory isn't as steep on the hosted. So that's kind of where I'm leaning, but I'll come back to you in 2 weeks with my final recommendation. Server storage, again, I don't want to belabor it, but there's that chunk of stuff above the arrow is stuff we're going to get rid of, and then the chunk of stuff underneath those two things are what's going to replace it. So what you're doing is you're retiring old servers and old storage, and you're replacing it with newer technologies called hyperverged infrastructure. It's basically got your server, your storage, and your networking all compressed into one unit. It's very modular. You can see the benefits there. I won't go through them, but it's just much more effective for utilization of your resources, and it's modular, it's flexible. Everything's managed with one interface, as opposed to trying to interwork all those pieces and manage them separately. Also, it does give you a path. The last point is kind of important. I think this gives us a path to eventually, as we use this technology and we consolidate down within our data centers, we can start to look at, when we have higher speed interconnects with the world, we could start to maybe look at offloading some of the stuff and actually hosting the actual stuff in the cloud and not have as much stuff in our data centers. So I think it provides us a path to taking advantage of some of the opportunities for the services in the cloud in the future. Just a quick touch on beyond next year. The point of this graph is really that we just have network upgrades, printer, copier upgrades, voice over IP features. We have classroom display technology. I mentioned this, I think, briefly in a previous meeting. Our technology in our classrooms for displays is 10 to 15 years old as well. It's pretty old stuff. It's it's analog, it's low resolution. So I would like to build into the budget have room in the budget to try to phase through the district in some orderly fashion and upgrade that technology. And the dollar amounts kind of depend, I think, where we are on the budget, but I'd like to start proceeding through that. Remember, I don't know, some of you may remember the days when we kind of went through the district grade level at a time and did all the LCD projectors. That was a long time ago, but now it's kind of time to do that again. So this is just kind of trying to break it down for you a little bit in terms of the major components of the budget. Last year, the FY18 The tech expense part was about almost 2.9 million, and that includes the O&M with the WAN and the internet and the telecommunications expenses. This is preliminary, but so far it's looking about to be the same, and part of that's just coincidence. It turns out, I mean, you know, we do try to, like, through leasing and through cycling things, like with the refresh, you know, you try to keep it a sort of even budget, but and we've been pretty successful at that. But in that budget is a little bit of room for, like, some of that display technology. So if things got tight and we needed to, we could ramp back. There's room to ramp back on a couple things if we need to, but more or less I'm trying to keep that budget flat, you know, even, so that we know what we're dealing with every year. But we're accomplishing a lot with that budget. This is just another way to look at the budget. Many of you may remember that a long time ago we said, you know, if we did you know, it kind of felt like 50% of our money was for just, you know, warranty and software licenses and supply parts and things like that. And then 35% would help us with upgrading to new systems, replacing systems that needed to be upgraded just because of it's their time. And then 15% would be really transformative, like new technology that we haven't seen before that's really going to move us forward. And that would include things like the Chromebooks and so on. So that was kind of a spread that we had talked about many years ago. And you can see that we've bounced around a little bit, but this year, this coming year, 18-19, looks like about 40% maintenance, 45% enhancement and replacing of systems and things, and then about 15% of the transformation. Again, that's mostly K2 technology and some other things, but it looks to me like we're really, the proportions aren't quite what we thought they might be, but they're close. So this information, if you have any questions, you can let me know. And then another line that we drew many years ago was, can we keep the tech budget somewhere around $2.75 million? And that kind of shows you where we've been. We did have that big boost in 15-16, and that's the one-to-one from grades 6 to 12. That just, because there was also infrastructure work there too. So we had infrastructure work and then tons of devices. So that pushed us way up to 3.45. But we've kind of hovered around that 2.9 million range the last few years. So maybe that bar is closer to 2.8, 2.9, but again, I just wanted to show you kind of where that sits. And lastly, just to show you that the column with the budget is what I plugged into Skyward at the beginning of the year, and then the actual expenditures is the report that came out the back end about what we actually spent. So you can see the last few years we've been about, you know, anywhere close to 90%, 100% one year. This year, the reason why that's red and it says 81.7 is because that's where we are through March of 2018. So as of now, as of beginning of April, you know, we're at 81.7. I don't see any reason why we would be even close to 100%. You know, we'll probably be in the mid to upper 90s this year. And then next year, again, predicting about a $2.85 million line, so just preliminarily. So that is a quick run through of all that dry stuff. So do you guys have any questions I can help you with? No questions? Will you have questions in 2 weeks when I come back and ask you to spend money on all this stuff?
If you want to do this offline, we just put in a new phone system and went through that math. We ended up doing a cloud-based system and saved a heck of a lot of money. So if you need a vendor,
I wouldn't mind talking with you if you don't mind. I mean, I've talked to several different vendors. I've been spending a lot of time on this, and I'm kind of torn. It's really...
I can grab our IT guy. So just, we don't have to do this right now, but ping me and...
I'd be happy to,
I'll connect you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, consent agenda. We have the personnel report. I need a motion.
I move that the Board of Education approve the superintendent's consent agenda, the personnel report.
Second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Karen, second by Margaret. Yes, we have the roll call. With two absent, though. Go ahead.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes.
Mr. McDonough's not here. Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Ms. Caforio?
Yes.
Mrs. Ebner?
Yes, it's 5 ayes, no nays, 2 absent. That motion passes. Go ahead, Dave. Action item?
Okay, so this is a request to approve another not-to-exceed number for White & Company to support the community engagement process that would transpire over the next several months as it relates to community engagement, materials that have to be put together, developed, focus groups, other types of board presentations, et cetera. Their last contract, they've already exceeded the dollar amount by $68,000 and have comped that work for us. And I think that it is unrealistic to expect them to continue to do that without giving them some appropriate compensation for what will be some very important work over the next couple months. And so we're recommending that we approve another not-to-exceed contract with them in the amount of $5,000.
A motion?
Can I just ask, I mean, we're going to talk, Malia, the next thing on the agenda is this community advisory team update. Before we vote, can we just figure out if there's anything that Malia is going to tell us that we should factor into this decision?
Yes, we could do that however you want. Let me, let's
I'm not asking for a long conversation here.
No.
I just, these would seem to be logically in reverse order.
Sure. All right, so there was an interest expressed in seeing boundary information, which we had planned to bring to you in April, and it was deemed very important that that happen as soon as possible, and so that happened tonight. We formed our CAT team and had an initial meeting on March 19th, and in that process, they reiterated the importance of boundaries as well as gave us very usable and helpful feedback on some of the information that we shared with them through exit surveys and emails and things that they suggested were they wanted to, find ways to simplify the presentation of the message, to put some various facility concepts into packages that were easily understood with costs attached and presented in a different way that would be more accessible for people to understand, et cetera. And so we're in the process of working on some of those things, and White actually expects to get the scenarios to Elizabeth, I believe, tomorrow, so that Elizabeth can begin getting some costs attached so that we can develop that draft presentation that the board wants to see and be able to present that to the board on April 24th, and then hopefully continue a second leg of the community engagement process. So that's kind of where we're at, and Malia can give you, I think, some additional specifics on top of that.
Well, bouncing off of what Dave said, because of this process, along with the newly received boundary information, we have put on hold the Lincoln Field Edison focus groups, which were supposed to begin tomorrow. We anticipate that you will be seeing a draft of the community presentation on May 8th, and we will hold the first community meeting on May 12th instead of April 30th. We've moved the April 30th meeting now to May 30th to just build in a little more time there. And I think we're also going to probably have to move the CAT meeting from April 23rd to April 30th. Again, just so we're taking in information from the board, feedback from the CAT team. So
I did misspeak. We were hoping for the 24th, and we didn't think that was going to work, so I gave the wrong date. Malia's date was the correct date.
But White & Company will be bringing a presentation to the board on the 24th.
The idea was to have the board see the presentation before it went to the CAT team, so that would, at our next meeting, right? We would see a presentation.
Oh, but we're going to have to iron those details out, because it's the revised White presentation that then would go to the CAT team, And then there would be, I think, a further presentation on May 8th. We're just trying, this is the problem we're having. We're trying to timeline everything, and it's becoming quite difficult because we're quickly headed toward the end of the year. We have lots and lots of activities in May. We're going to have the 4 community engagement meetings, the future-focused community engagement meetings in May. The dates are Saturday, May 12th at York Community High School from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m., Monday, May 14th from 7 to 9 p.m. at Churchville, Wednesday, May 23rd from 7 to 9 p.m. at Bryan, Wednesday, May 30th from 7 to 9 p.m. at Sandburg. And these dates will be advertised in our annual report, which is ready to be printed and hopefully mailed within a couple of weeks to the entire community. So we will be pushing these dates, but we've really got to get our legwork done ahead of that. So we are a little bit concerned about the timeline, and that's why at this point in time we decided to put the focus groups on hold. We'll have to have further discussion about how exactly we're going to address that. Also, I wanted to, if we want to just go ahead with this, I want to make sure that everybody knows, I did email the board about some issues we had during the community advisory team application process. Due to a glitch with our matrix, Marcia Sutter, our communications consultant, was given the wrong information when she reported at the March 20th meeting. She stated that we had no applicants under age 35 and that there's only one member representing the Madison Early Childhood Education Center. As it turns out, we had a number of applications representing both of these groups. So last week, via lottery, we chose 3 under 35 representatives from among the 11 people who applied and fit that demographic. And I want to thank Robin Petchel because she brought this issue to our attention, and I want to apologize to her and the 10 other applicants for the error. We're very sorry about that. We'll get the 3 new members up to speed before our next CAP meeting, and we are looking forward to their contributions. Additionally, I want to point out that we currently have 3 separate Madison representatives serving on CAT, so we do have representation there too, and so this is 3 people and 3 separate people. So I think we're going to be good to go there. But I do appreciate, Robin, thank you very much, and we're going to move forward. Okay.
So I just wanted to clarify, on the 24th, we were going to hear a presentation from White with updates from the board meeting from February 24th.
Yes.
And the first CAP meeting in March.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What?
And we wanted the board to see that presentation before we show that to CAT. So it's complicated to kind of layer all this with preset board meetings and deadlines looming. So we're going to do the best we can to get everybody in the loop on this.
One question on the, I know the timeline is very tight, but you mentioned the focus groups, and they're on hold now. What are the plans for them?
Well, we need to discuss that further. I think May is jam-packed right now. I think it's probably unrealistic to talk about focus groups in May. We could try to move to early June. I know Marcia and Leslie plan to present to the board on June 19th. We would want to have that feedback included. There is some possibility, again, we're just throwing out ideas. We have contracted with Thought Exchange for a Thought Exchange survey, but a full-blown survey takes more time than we have right at this moment in time. But they have provided a new concept for mini surveys. So we talked about possibly doing targeted mini surveys to each of these 3 schools. Once we determine what it is the board wants to know, what do we want to ask these groups, these people. I know Dave has some concern about this because we really do want to have face-to-face meetings, but somehow maybe we can blend face-to-face meetings and the technology, again, using the technology as a tool to gather information. That has not all been determined yet. It kind of depends on how quickly we decide to move through this timeline.
I think that we want to honor the board's request to have meetings with each of the schools, but we might have to structure that in a way where we start with a certain type of meeting for the 3 most affected schools, for example, and then have a different type of meeting perhaps with the other schools and do the first three first as soon as possible to shape, whatever evolution of feedback comes out of that, and then, continue the information process with the other schools after we hit them. They've been talking about a lot of things, and then, we run things past each other. We actually have contracted for 2 thought exchange surveys this year. We haven't done any. We could do 2. So we have to work with them on our contract and probably talk to them about, pushing some of that work back into the next fiscal year.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate, I share the same goal. I've been hammering on timeline. I think we all want a plan that's widely embraced. The goal isn't to get it done, the goal is to get it executed. So, you guys got to be honest with us as we go down the road here, because it has to build momentum. And November would be great, but a failed referendum in November would be horrible. And so I don't think any of us wants our name on a failed referendum, and I think that we want to feel confident that people have had a chance to voice. We're not going through and checking boxes, that we talk to these folks. We actually genuinely want that feedback. I appreciate the push to accelerate, but if something has to give, it's going to be the timeline.
And speaking on behalf of Marcia and Leslie, I will just say they do have concern about that. They do have concern that we have time to complete that feedback loop. So it can be done, but you're going to have to sacrifice some things to get there. And if you don't want to sacrifice those things, then that's what the board needs to tell us.
You can't sacrifice something that's going to jeopardize the success of the end goal. And that's the point. And I think probably where we are right now is going through this first iteration, and let's see where we're at.
Well, that's why this is still kind of yet to be discussed, because I think we need to bring the presentation to the board on the 24th, to see what happens at that meeting, see what your reactions are, and then we'll have a better idea.
All right, how soon, I'm going to be out of town that day. How soon, how far in advance can I get that, or can we get that?
Friday before. When it really, I don't think it's going to be, again, we're pushing and pushing just to.
All right, okay, I understand.
Elizabeth just got the figures, or we'll get them tomorrow. So it's very tight, Chris.
Okay.
I'll be honest.
I have a question of clarification. So the 3 focus groups were at the 3 schools, targeted schools. And the 4 communications meetings in May are for the whole community.
They are for the whole community,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. So, and that's a place where people from all of our elementary schools can come and ask questions and learn. And yes, we would highly encourage everyone in the community to attend those. We've scheduled them at the middle schools just because we did that process last year, and people seem to feel comfortable with going to their feeder school, but it's going to be the same presentation at all 4 meetings. So, if you can't make this meeting, come to that meeting. It's really what works with your schedule. But yes, y'all please come.
I just wondered, initially the thought was to have those focus groups first and then do the community, the larger community. What's your thinking on doing, like, flip-flopping?
Again, I think the timeline is, we've already set these community meetings. We didn't have information about the boundary studies. We really felt that was key to setting up the focus group meetings, and we just got that information, so it's just becoming more and more compressed. So I think as long as we get feedback, I'm not sure it matters exactly when. I just think, to your point, Chris, we're trying to come up with something that's palatable, understandable, relatable to the entire community. So I'm not sure order is that important.
Thank you. Did you have something? Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this, and thank you. I know, Dave, Dr. Moyer mentioned, I'm just stressing, I think the focus groups are very important. So I know we're stressing on time, but I want to be sure that we find a way to fit those in, particularly my idea would be a face-to-face for those 3 affected. If there has to be another way to get the other schools in, certainly open to thoughts on what that looks like, but I think those are really very important, and foregoing those would not be ideal.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go to 7A, approval of agreement with White and Company. Is there a motion?
I move that the Board of Education approve the agreement with White and Company for community engagement support in an amount not to exceed $5,000.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by John, second by Kara. Any discussion?
The explanation is that this is for additional services because this project has gone on further. Is that the explanation?
Well, the initial scope of their estimate for services was based on certain conditions, and yes, the fact that it's being dragged out past, what the initial scope of what we thought the work was going to be is a factor for the consultants that we're utilizing, and also the initial work that they quoted us was really supposed to be for that first phase that took us through where we got to in February. And so even though it took a lot of work, more work on their part than what was originally estimated, they held to their end of the agreement to deliver what I think was quality work to get us to this point, but it wasn't really intended. It was intended for that phase of the work, and we're moving into another phase now that's just going to require some additional work and support on their end.
Mr. McDonough?
Go ahead.
Yes.
Mrs. Caforio?
Yes.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mrs. Epner?
Yes, that's 7 ayes, no nays. That motion passes. Board communications. Okay. We have 2 actions on closed session. First is student disciplinary case. Go ahead.
I move that the Board of Education approve the administrative recommendation for the expulsion of student A for the remainder of 2017-2018 school year, the entire 2018-2019 school year, and the first semester of the 2019-2020 school year.
There's a second?
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Karen, second by Chris. We need a roll call.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes.
Mr. McDonough?
Present but not voting.
Mrs. Caforio?
Yes.
Mrs. Epner?
Yes, that's 6 ayes, no nays, 1 present. That motion passes. Approval of resolution authorizing the honorable dismissal of teachers.
I'd like to make a motion that the Board of Education approve the resolution authorizing the honorable dismissal of teachers.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Kara, second by Margaret. Do roll call.
Mrs. Caforio?
Yes.
Dr. Harrell?
Yes.
Mr. Bloom?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mr. McDonough?
Yes.
Mrs. Epner?
Yes, that's 7 ayes, no nays. That motion passes. We have two upcoming meetings, April 24th, Board of Education meeting, 7:30, and Tuesday, May 8th, Board of Education meeting, 7:30. And we've reached the end of the agenda. I'll declare the meeting adjourned.